Good afternoon, everyone. It's so wonderful to see such a great audience today. I am Maria Perbellini. I'm the Dean of the School of Architecture and Design, New York Tech. And I have the pleasure today of welcoming you to our symposium, Biodynamic Environments, Designing Healthier Materials and Therapeutic Spatial Interactions. The symposium is focused on how rapidly a variety of environments affected by climate change have forced us to face preconceptions about what and how we build, and includes presentations on the exploration of new and innovative bio-based materials and solutions. It also addresses how our health and well-being are impacted, motivating us to develop healthy and therapeutic spatial strategies, taking advantage of new technologies and advances in material and biological sciences. But before we start, I would like to personally welcome our guest speakers. And we have today Alexandros Samis, Assistant Professor in Architecture and Associate Director of CASE, Center for Architecture, Science and Ecology at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. We have LAIA MOGAS-SOLDEVILA, Assistant Professor at UPenn School of Design and Director of DUMO Lab. Dr. Katia Zolotowski, Assistant Professor in the College of Arts, Media and Design in the Department of Art and Design, with a joint appointment in the College of Science, Department of Chemistry and Chemical Biologies at Northeastern University, and she's also the director of the Bio-Interactive Design Lab. We have Catherine Murphy, senior researchers at Parsons, and she's also working in the Healthy Materials Lab, and Mitchell Joachim, associate professor of practice at NYU and co-founder of Terraform One. I also want to welcome our lecture and event committee chair and the organizer of today's important symposium, Assistant Professor Athina Papadopoulou. Thank you, Athina, for giving us the opportunity to welcome such a distinguished parterre of guests, who has brought this team of experts and industry leaders together to discuss this critical area of interest. And Athina has also engaged some of our distinguished faculty to share their experiences, work, and research, and provide perspectives that could engage with the topics of our presentations. And in fact, I want to welcome our faculty, Professor Marcella Del Signore, Associate Professor and Director of our Urban and Regional Design Program, and Interim Director of our MARC program, Professor Christian Pongratz, Director of our MS in Health and Design, Professor Alessandro Melis, the IDC Foundation Endowed Chair and Director of our MS in Computational Technologies, and Assistant Professor and our Interior Design Director, Florencia Vecher. Athina will provide more insights and more details and more information about the symposium, including the bios, some of the bios of our guests. And I would like to invite Athina to join me on the podium, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. I am delighted to be chairing the symposium today. As the chair of the Lecture and Events Committee, I would like to first of all thank again our Dean Maria Perbellini for the support and advice on the events in the School of Architecture, and also Associate Deans Giovanni Santamaria and Anthony Caradona and our chair Trudy Burns. In addition, I would like to thank all of the faculty members of the Lecture and Events Committee and our events coordination, Susan Steinberg, for organizing with me the events for this year's series, Future by Design. So I'm delighted to reconnect here with dear friends from the time of studies at MIT Design Computation Group, Katia Zolotowski, LAIA MOGAS-SOLDEVILA, and Alexandros Samis, who was there a little bit before us. Also to welcome Mitchell Joachim, who's also alum from the same MIT group, and Catherine Murphy. and see the amazing work they're all doing in their current important positions in institutions. I'm sure that their fascinating research involving design, computing, materials, and biology will inspire and inform all of us, faculty and students. Today's symposium is the result of discussions we have been having at the Masters of Health and Design program, exploring new ways to approach health through material innovation. The alarming effects of the rapidly changing climate have forced us to rethink making and manufacturing processes, reducing carbon footprint, and adopting circular economy processes. At the same time, advances on materials allow us to explore emerging responsive and bioactive material properties. The Biodynamic Environments Symposium invites us to approach health holistically through an exploration centered on biobased materials and on interactions with our environments that can enhance our health and well-being. But what are biodynamics environments, you might ask? The term biodynamic is an interesting term. When used in the context of agriculture, it addresses a farm as a self-sufficient, dynamic living organism. The same term, biodynamic, in the context of environmental medicine, addresses the dynamic processes seen as the biodynamic interface between humans and environments that impact our health. However, their design and architecture seem to be missing from the relevant literature. We have gathered today to be inspired through the talks of our excellent speakers to reflect on what are biodynamic environments in the context of design and architecture, on how we design for healthier and therapeutic spatial interactions, and how we can educate towards healthier futures through designing and making. So each of my colleagues moderating will be introducing our speakers, and each of the speakers will be presenting for 20 to 25 minutes. We'll do a brief break after our third speaker, and at the end of the symposium, we'll have plenty of time for discussion and questions from our audience. With that, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Alexandros Tsamis. Alexandros Tsamis is an architect and assistant professor at the School of Architecture at RPI. He currently serves as the graduate program director of the Build Ecology's MS and PhD programs and the associate director of CASE. He earned his PhD in Architecture, Design and Computation and Master of Science in Design and Building Technology at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And previously, he served as the post-professional graduate program director in design at Adolfo Ibáñez University in Chile, and has taught at MIT, the Knowlton School of Architecture, Ohio State University. Tsamis works at the intersection of design and architectural sciences. He focuses on next generation composite materials, climate adaptive and cyber physical energy systems, and advanced manufacturing technologies. So please join me in welcoming Alexandros.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I hope you can hear me. Yes? Closer? We can. Gonna sing. Okay, better? Yes. It's very nice to be here to discuss the topic of biodynamic environments. I don't know if I have expertise on the topic, but I thought when I was given it, I was thinking that I would give you an overview of what are my personal interests and how they began 20 years ago when I was a research student, and how these interests have evolved until the work that I am doing today. It's very nice that I am with familiar faces and that we get to discuss this together. So one of the things that became a very early preoccupation with me was how, when in architecture, we deal with materials as if we are choosing them from a catalog. This was back when I was...
I'm just checking you the sound.
Am I? Okay, so it's me. so that we are choosing materials from a catalog, and the role of the architect was to design a form or to design a wall, and then go to pick up the phone and call somebody to say, I would like this or like that, get the specs and so on. This is I'm talking about early 2000s, 2001, 2002, 2003. The blob architecture was that at Epitome, lots of shiny surfaces that they were manufactured in whatever way possible. And the question was becoming even more pressing then, because all of them, they would not kind of engage with materiality at all, that kind of trend, and they would only focus on how to get the form done. There was a publication that piqued my interest by Toshiko Mori called Immaterial Ultramaterial, that pointed to the advances in material science and how architecture should start incorporating material characteristics into the design of form. That was one seminal reading for me at the time. A few years later, the Atlas of Novel Tectonics by Reiser and Umemoto pointed to the intensive characteristics of space and how those translate into architectural form and architectural material, and started a discussion about a redefinition of the notion of tectonics, which for me became something that I was preoccupied with. And other things that were going on was at MIT, there was a lab, a material science lab, that started investigating functionally graded materials, which were the kind of composite materials that exhibit heterogeneous behaviors, and they are custom made. So that was for me a first instance of, this is a material that can be designed. It's not a material that you pick, because it's only appropriate for the condition that it is in. And another book I read that kind of pointed to the way we are accustomed to understand materiality was a book called Lightness. It has a subtitle, I don't remember it. That was looking at the history of composite materials, and it was demonstrating how pre-industrial societies were in tune. Form and material for them was one thing. It was associated with craft, but they were making form by manipulating material directly. And during the Industrial Revolution, those were composite materials, according to the authors. During the Industrial Revolution, the composite materials started disappearing, and they became more and more standardized and separated as a process from the design of form. So all of this kind of cloud led me to start thinking about the way we can design materials. I started developing a software that was unlike the software that we had in the time, which was, we still have them today. Rhino was the thing back then as well, that you use in order to identify objects and synthesize objects. I started designing I started creating my own software that I wanted it to be like the software that we use, but instead of designing with form or with lines and with surfaces, you were designing with material properties. So this example here was called vSpace, and this example here is of what I was considering at the time a designed environment of chemical processes that are happening dynamically. As I was becoming a little bit more mature into the topic, I started realizing that the ecological project for architects, like our realization that the built environment has a huge impact on the built environment, and it has a huge carbon footprint, and it affects biodiversity and ecological footprint in general, requires from us architects to start considering the environment in different terms. Like I was thinking that we require some sort of a cognitive shift. That shift is traditionally, when you think about it, when you're being taught in school of architecture, the environment is a context, is a thing that you have to deal with. While if you understand that every human activity has impact on the environment, what is what became for me clear is that the object of design, what we are actually designing, are environments. And since then, since that realization and all my work until today, I'm trying to understand what that actually means, how we do it. Jeanette Sordi keeps pointing out that in landscape architecture, the concept has been around much earlier because they were looking at larger scale, territory scale things. But there wasn't an equivalent when we had to deal with materials. So this is an example of a very early machine I was trying to make that actually prints two materials together and mixes them dynamically with a budget of like $500 and eBay at the time buying parts to make it work. Eventually, a few years down the line, it kind of started working. The idea is that if you have material properties that you have defined in a software, how can you give instructions to a machine to continuously dynamically mix materials to achieve local performance characteristics like the ones I was reading of functionally graded materials? And then it was also for me an opportunity to start thinking, because of the idea of tectonics, of what kinds of new affordances do those new technologies incur for us. So like I was thinking early on, if we have a building envelope and it has all of these parts and all of these parts go together and all of them are made by single purpose machines from the industrial era, the insulation, the brick, the column, and all of these things, having the ability to continuously mix materials and having the ability to achieve formal complexity and material complexity at the same time, what kinds of new technologies can we invent? This is an example of a building envelope that was thought of as a thermodynamic interface. It was inflating and deflating in order to theoretically change the insulation value of that material, of that building envelope, and in essence create a dynamic thermodynamic phenomenon out of the envelope of a building. I abandoned this stuff for a very long time. And then I visited them again very recently when I came to CASE. This is work that we're doing with a PhD student called Elena Petrucci. She's excellent at what she does. Again, now today we are thinking about how the same concept of a functionally graded material, of additive manufacturing as a technology, and the ability to access data and manipulate data can allow us to augment performative characteristics on a building envelope. We started looking at all those possible materials that we could be working with. Some of them are bio-derived, some of them are earth abundant, like bioplastics and so on. Materials like kelp, for example, and so on. And we ended up with a combination of a cementitious material, clay, and a phase change material, which is a material that has the ability to absorb and store heat, made out of coconut oil. So we found a process, we found a paper on a process that you can encapsulate oils and create small beads that we were considering to be additives in a ceramic manufacturing process. Then we started studying how much heat can an object retain based on the amount of phase change material that is embedded into it. And the idea is to be able to continuously print an object that has variations in the amount of heat it can absorb. If you think of a typical building that is exposed to different orientations, it receives different amounts of energy because of the sun. So the bet that we have is like, if we fine tune a building that has a formal complexity and has a relationship with its environment that is complex as well, and we custom tailor the amount of heat storage that we can put locally in an envelope, will that incur more energy benefits than a typical process of insulating a material? The work is going down into trying to identify what concentrations of material and what location of PCM in a chunk of a building envelope will incur what kind of energy benefits. This is Energy Plus and simulations in that nature. And then the idea is that if you have data of the energy that is occurring on a building envelope, how can you match one by one the different concentrations? We are building a new machine at Case. For all of you that are local, you're welcome to come visit. And we are also,
Careful what you eat.
yes, you can come. That does exactly that. It has two material containers and it dynamically mixes material. And also we are looking at, we are revisiting the idea of tectonics again. Like if we have this, how can we build in a way that kind of relates thermal performance and structural performance in one coherent topological definition of material. One of the things that occurred to us when we started working with these natural bio-derived materials is that they're never the same, meaning they are not commodities like the typical materials you call Home Depot and and they are affected by many things, weather patterns, they're affected about specific crops and so on and so forth. So my personal aspiration for the future that I think could be an engaging topic to have in the community of people that are working with this is, if these materials are not materials chosen from a catalog anymore, but they are locally derived and they are, what is a way we can integrate them into the design process so that they are not exotic one-off demonstrations of things that we do, but they become more integrated into the everyday life. If we aspire with a low carbon bio-derived material to reduce the carbon footprint of the building industry, we will only do that if these materials are actually adopted by the building industry. And because the building industry works with standards and specifications, we need to somehow connect the uncertainty of those materials to something standard so that it can be actually incorporated into the building industry. So I'm proposing some sort of the concept of a differential material. It is a catalog that is sensitive to locality and sensitive to mixture. But if done long enough, there is a way you can predict the properties of materials regardless of the specific instance of them. One thing that occurred to me very recently is that we can learn from McDonald's for once. McDonald's has they have place everywhere. McDonald's is everywhere in the world, and they have to sell you a burger, and the burger has to taste the same everywhere you go. That's their thing. And they have found that every patty has like meat from 200 cows or something like this. So in order for the burger to be the same or equivalent, although the cow is growing happier or sadder or with more water and less water in I don't know, in the US or in Brazil or in Greece, wherever, because they mix them and they average them, they are able to get to something that is standardized. That's probably one way to go about it. And the other thing that I am very interested in general is, again, with these projects that are one-off functionally graded materials, additive manufacturing, these are projects that they look very impressive to me. My colleagues are doing great work on the topic that I am aware of, and I'm very impressed with them. But there is also the world that is the 99% of architecture that is being built that is very distanced from it. And I think that one kind of work that we can engage with is try to understand, try to think, if additive manufacturing with formal complexity and material complexity was to get inside the book of building technology and be described in the same way a 2x4 balloon frame construction is, what would that entry look like today? And how could that be taken from architects that are creative to make their own unique off pieces, but how it can also become a standard practice that can be used for everyday architecture? Again, because if we aspire for a low carbon footprint, we need to see this happening in the world. I think that the typical way that 3D printing is working today with the 2 layers and the infill that comes actually from plastic 3D printers is very far away from what it could be if we put some time into thinking about the model of construction. So as you heard, I am the associate director of CASE. CASE is a research center that is institute-wide, and it has a role at the university to create umbrella projects that span across the different departments. So we do not, as a research center, we do not belong to the School of Architecture. We belong to the institute. So we are like, let's say, we have oversight of what's going on in many different departments and many different other research centers relevant for the built environment. What we do as our internal mission, let's say, is to create large-scale umbrella projects that with which we can attract researchers from different departments and join forces to create big things. One of them is called Seed to City, and it's based on the premise that if we want biomaterials to become a reality, we have to work on all fronts at the same time, meaning we have to work at the seed level, like how is the material growing, under what circumstances, what kinds of jobs it creates, who is processing them, and so on. We have to work with manufacturing. We have to work with supply chains. We have to work with workforce development, and we have to work with new applications that we can use in order to incentivize this economy to happen. These materials that we are discussing, that are materials that are designed and they're off the catalog, they don't exist. They are materials that come on the fly. And because they come on the fly, they are very difficult to integrate in the world unless you manage to create enough momentum in an economy, create an economy around those materials so that they can become available. So this is what the Seed2City is doing. A couple of examples. I was very fortunate to receive a grant along with many other faculty members at RPI from architecture and mechanical engineering, material science and business, and some industry partners to create a retrofit technology for existing buildings out of hemp. We received $2 million. It's a project that just started, and we are going to have 3 years to develop it further. This is a very mundane, simple thing. A jacket for a building that addresses 50% of the stock of housing in the United States that is underperforming. What kind of technology can you add? Let's say, how can you intervene so that you reduce the energy consumption of those buildings, and at the same time create an economy for a renewable materials economy around it. So this is 95% out of hemp fiber. It is the most volume gets detached, so it can become part of a circular economy. It can be returned safely to earth. It has to cost $1 more per square foot than typical siding. So, and we have a premium because we're working with materials that are not commodities. So we have to design logistics and the way people would install them, and how easy it is going to be, and what kinds of tools they use, and all of these kinds of know-hows in order to make it successful. All of this for me is a different kind of way to think about designing a material as if it's an environment. It is an environment that is technical and it is social at the same time. Within the same line, another project is called the Feeling Decorticator. It is led by mechanical engineering professor at RPI. He's the director of the Manufacturing Innovation Center. And it is a technology that peels fibers from hemp in a way that doesn't damage the fibers. The way we do it today, we damage the fibers a lot. Hemp fibers are the strongest fibers that exist, the second strongest, but almost the best fibers that exist in the naturally made. And the way we extract them, we destroy them. The oil industry has spent 150 years to refine the way we extract oil. It looks like mud at the beginning, and then we have all the exotic fluids. For us, we are still at the very early stage with natural materials, with materials that come from the earth. So there is a lot of work to be done to develop them further. We are developing a barn, which is the place where this economy would be incentivized. It's basically a node in a network of supply chains. This is the area where machines are hosted. Farmers go to process their crops, It is where the previous machine I showed you could be inside, and it is an area where education can happen, workforce development can happen, raise awareness. And also we're doing it in a way that we build with hemp materials so that we show what it can do. Again, it's the approach with this project is let's make it happen in a way. And the last, we are developing a rebar. We are developing a reinforcement for cement made out of hemp. This is a 50% hemp, 50% an upcycled plastic or a bioplastic. We are still working on the definition of it. This is the way the machine would look, like tractor style. It is meant to be accessible to everyone. It is a small scale machine that receives a rope as input, processes it into specific shapes and cuts it automatically, but it's meant to be a local production facility. It's meant to redefine the way supply chains work around these kind of big infrastructural projects. So we are on purpose designing them at a small scale with low energy consumption so that we can incentivize local production of rebar in this case. This is, as you can imagine, a technology that is, because it's made out of fiber and plastic, it doesn't corrode. And because it doesn't corrode, it can extend the lifetime of cement, which is the baddest material on the planet, but it's the baddest material because of the sheer volume that it has and we use it, and not necessarily because of its carbon footprint. So if we keep it even longer, we have chances of reducing the carbon footprint of infrastructural projects. This is a diagram of the way it works. This is the rope. This is the way it looks. It is a composite material. It is a functionally graded composite material because the exterior skin is a different material than the interior, and it is a nested kind of rope, but it is made out of machines that exist today in the world, nothing exotic there. These are our laboratory tests of this machine that you pull through. These are tests that we are making with a kind of microwave that needs to be part of the process so that you can elevate the temperature. It's just below melting temperature within a very small time frame, because that's again another point about the way we think about biomaterials. We are trying to get a production rate that is similar to the production rate of materials that exist today. For example, fiberglass rebar or a stainless steel rebar is produced at 2 meters a minute. If we have a production that is 2 centimeters a minute, it's not gonna happen. I mean, it's a fantastic idea, but it's not gonna happen. So we are trying to see what kind of technology will allow this production rate to compete so that it can become a project that exists. And this is the front part of the machine. This is a pultrusion technology, and this is what will eventually pulls the material through the hot die and shapes it according to a CNC manufacturing technology, and then cuts it to length. Again, because there is a premium in using these kinds of materials versus the other ones that are abundant, and we know the know-how is there. So we're trying to get some logistical advantages associated with them so we can drive the cost down to make it work. So if I have to say something about the way we design materials, I would say that what I'm really interested in these days is how, starting from the molecular understanding of the material, we have to be able to span all the way to the productive engine behind them. And that's the broader environment that we are designing now. When we are designing the C2C, for example, and when we're trying to create an economy, we are not just changing the kind of material we're using. We are changing social structures. We are changing manufacturing protocols, let's say. We are changing supply chains. And that's a bigger environment that contains the chemistry, but also contains society and the way it is, and the way it will evolve in the future. Thank you very much. I hope I was...
Thank you so much, Alexander, for the fascinating talk. And I feel like every time we see your work, it's like a whole new range of projects. So it's fascinating how many good work comes out of CASE. I'd like to invite my colleague, Director of Health and Design, Christian, to introduce our next speaker. 'Cause, 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 'cause
Yeah, thank you, Alexander. It was really great. I could not agree more with you that we have to be local in the future, and we have to exploit, of course, what we have locally. And getting there, I think it's really important to understand what is the waste to be produced locally and how do we actually integrate it into the new kind of production process. So now we introduce our next speaker, which is Katja. Briefly spoke with her before. We had some exchange prior in one of our materials classes. Came in for some reviews, and Katja has also, I think, what is interesting, her family history kind of experience in different continents. I think that shapes probably bright minds. And in a sense also, I think, allows you probably to appreciate different localities in that sense. And that brings maybe to bear in your work. So Katja is an assistant professor in the Department of Art and Design, and also teaches in chemistry and chemical biology. Her background is a Bachelor of Architecture and a BA in biology, and then she moved on, like our dear colleague Atina at MIT, in a master and PhD in computation and architecture. She's an architect in that sense and biologist, and her work lies at the intersection of sustainable innovation, computational design, and in particular material technologies. That's why I think we continue the topic right now. Her dissertation focused on design and computation with biologically active materials. Before joining Northeastern, and I think you give a brief overview, she was at Rhode Island School of Design, teaching their sustainable material innovation and spatial design, and led research initiatives focusing again on innovation in computation and materials. And now she's at Northeastern University and kicking off a lab in bio-interactive materials, and I hope we will hear more of that. So Katja, I ask you to come to the stage, and let's welcome Katja.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Christian, for the introduction. I'm super happy to be here with my friends from the computation group at MIT. So I named my talk DNA Computation, Water, Soil, and Air as sites for biodynamic environments design. So wait, I need to, okay. So I'm not gonna spend a long time on this, but I have a 2 undergraduate degree in biology and architecture that helped me navigate the intersection of STEM and design. And throughout, so like many of the presenters today, I defined my research through my work at MIT. I did my master's, PhD, and postdoc there. So I started working with structural materials in nature. And through my work with mimicking those with 3D printing technique, I kind of got interested in the growth processes and how the intricate architectures of material come to life. And I did my postdoc in Synthetic Biology Center learning about biotechnology. And then I went to design, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And I'm coming back to research and science through my new role in starting the Biointeractive Design Lab at Northeastern. So I'm going to present a vision today, how DNA computation can be embedded in cells and materials to create biomaterial systems, and how, so this is the first part of my talk, kind of overview and my dissertation, and then how we can use the domains of the environment like air, water, and soil as design intervention sites. So here you can see, so this is a slide of vision of how living cells that are invisible bits of material that embed computational capabilities can be part of our everyday life. So on the left, you see that cells are those units that can sense their environment, so they can take signals from environment as inputs, process information, and actuate processes of production, communication, growth, and pattern formation. So tools of bioengineering allow us to tap into the library of smart and sustainable environmental interactions that evolved over billions of years that life exists on the Earth. So you can see how the inputs for those computation can be chemicals, light, heat, and then inside the cells, there is logic gates that translate those signals into actuation. And the outputs can be light, can be material production, etc. And the vision is that those can be embedded in our computational devices, so like cell phones, and can store information, be gaming elements in our wearables that can be monitoring our health real time, and also in materials, and fabricate our materials based on environmental input. So if we look at cells as models for design, these units come in different shapes and forms, from simplest form of bacteria to forms increasing in size, complexity, and computational power, such as plants and even animal cells. So working with cells as design materials present a lot of ethical and regulational aspects that I'm not going to touch in this presentation, but we can maybe have conversation later. Yeah, and there are other design parameters to consider, such as the doubling time, so how fast they grow and respond, computational capacity, which is measured by the number of genes, how many genes are there, growth conditions and care that the cells require, as well as larger architectures they build in nature, such as two-dimensional films for bacteria or complex 3D architectures for plants and animal cells. Oh, sorry, this was the slide. Okay, so programming with biology. So there is the central dogma that allows to translate information that is stored in the DNA to the proteins, and this by assembling the monomers inside the cells into larger sequences, and then they become functional molecules that go out of the cell and mediate the environment, biochemical processes in the environment. So the inputs can be light, can be concentration of gases, can be physical things like temperature and pressure, can be also like concentrations of chemicals and presence of other cells, so interactions with other cells. And the output can be actuation of material production and growth processes, communication, again, like those biochemical processes, so production, and can also be power generation and mechanical energy. So for scaling up processes of work with living cells, we need still to embed them in materials because those are like invisible units. So there are two main routes to go for scaling up in manufacturing with living cells. So one is guiding and shaping of the structure externally. So we can repurpose existing manufacturing methods such as casting, material casting, additive manufacturing, and also parts assembly. When you assemble fluidic devices that embed, encapsulate cells in their growth environment inside other devices. And here I see tools of people in this room, such as architects, like super useful. And the other way is hacking growth processes that are unique to biology, which is self-organizing, patterning, and growth processes that are forming complex pattern in 3D architectures. So those are being developed mostly for medicine and regenerative medicine. So some examples of projects. So this is from an overview paper that we are writing with my science friends, with whom I did my postdoc. And what we are doing is we are collecting all examples of research that are outside of medicine. So in this case, you see on the upper part, it's the power actuation. So how we can generate power using living cells in design. And this stingray, artificial stingray project, so this one, is layering muscle cells on substrate, on silicon substrate. and is activated by light. So it's programmed to be activated by light, and that results to construction of muscle cells, and the stingray moves, so propels forward. On the right here, you see layering of cyanobacteria cells on an anode and cathode, printed with inkjet printer. So this is a regular inkjet printer. And this is for electrical power generation, enough to power like a small light or a small electrical device. So for the built environment application, you need a solid and high cell volume. So here you can see a mixture of algae, living brick molded with a mixture of cyanobacteria, its growth media, hydrogel, and sand. And the cyanobacteria inside the brick improves the property, the structural property, by metabolizing and creating a mineralization, so creating mineralized strong material. On the right here, you can see a 3D printing of spores inside a gel that can be, so spores are very resilient to extreme environment, and they can be activated by hydration to start and can be programmed to carry out some processes of generating material and responding to the environment. So here they are expressing fluorescent light. So for textile application, for example, there are examples of embedding bacteria that produce pigment in the fabric as a more sustainable way to produce color patterns. And those can be also linked to environmental signals. So on the bottom here, you see adhesion of bacterial cells on textile activated by light. So you can imagine application of patterning specific to environmental signal. On the right here, you can see a Living Tattoo project from MIT, where different cells that are programmed to respond to different chemical signals on the skin and produce different colors. So you can see how different branches here have different colors. As environmental tattoo that kind of monitors both can monitor internal conditions, but also external environment. Here you can see a more speculative project from the Media Lab that embeds living cells that produce pigments in flexible substrate and in wearable masks. All right, so my own work during my dissertation was inventing new fabrication processes for living material. And I focused on this one material system that is bacteria that make cellulose fibers. So this is a native system that bacteria, as it swims, assembles sugar molecule into cellulose fibers. And then in a liquid, they accumulate as layers of cellulose on the surface and interface between the liquid and the air. So you see how those layers like float up to the surface of the liquid and accumulate. And this material can be grown in large sheets. So invisible bacteria can produce larger sheets of material and can be dried. Here you can see Alex's mold from the previous presentation that I borrowed. And designers use this material to design things in its inert form. So they kill the material and then use it with conventional sewing strategies. So you see jackets, shoes, and then inventing new fabrications. So like no waste growth of the material into the pattern that's needed. So for my own process, I wanted to start on the cell level. So starting with programming the cells themselves. And this is both for practical applications, for example, changing the material properties, so changing the absorbance of this material, and also embedding environmental interactions into the material system. So you can see here, this is a plasmid. So this is a new gene molecule that introduces new function into the cell. And there's step-by-step protocols how to put them into cells and then scaling up from colonies of cells on the Petri dish to materials that embed the new genetic program. And I developed some graphic illustrations of those protocols so the vision is that non-expert designers can use the library of those genetic circuits and components and assemble new material systems. And then, so starting from the cell to the material, on the next level, the vision is to edit the growth environment. So how we can develop new fabrication strategies, manipulating the growth environment to shape, pattern, harvest, process, and stabilize materials grown. So here you can see a process that we developed. So since the material is accumulating on the interface between the liquid and the air, so we designed this air permeable silicone component that when you grow the cellulose in there, it will form a 3D shape because the air is all around. So kind of growing it into 3D shapes, as well as introducing new properties. So through the growth environment. So for example, magnetic powder allows to make magnetic biofilms or plasticizers to make more flexible materials. And then on the next level, we can automate the process of regulating the growth conditions and introduce new design requirements. So we built this bioreactor, which is a vessel that allows to automate the process of growth condition regulation. Both externally and internally, it can get feedback also from the growth process. So just like the main components are a system of, so there's a code that you can encode the operation of valves and pumps over here, and then the liquid. So each of the growth vessel gets its own regulation, or like a cluster of regulation of what goes in and what goes out over time. So this is automated, and we had this vision of like architectural envelope built this way. So I continue now to work with a PhD student who uses machine learning to develop real-time feedback by taking a lot of pictures of the growth process as it happens to kind of have internal regulation. So this is kind of an overview of what the vision of material system is. And now we'll show some projects in those domains of air, water, and soil. So this is a project that the vision is for architecture. Could future materials sense and communicate environmental data? Can they detect and remediate air pollutants and pathogens, and maybe even modify composition of air for stress release? And this is a collaborative project with LAIA and Vlasta Kubusova, who is from Craftic Plastic Studio. And we had a team of students who worked from the science at UPenn on this project. And again, the vision is for architectural integration. So we used DNA-based systems that are cell-free and embedded them in biomaterials and used the fabrication platform to introduce them into lattices for interior design. And those are for invisible threat detection and customized well-being, and hopefully for air cleaning in the future. So the outputs can be visible, tangible color release, or aroma release, or it can be actual metabolizing the pollutants in the air. So the cell-free system is a cell-free system is this little vial that comes with the insides of the cells, so the DNA and everything that's needed, like the energy source and the components of the molecular assembly, to assemble functional proteins that can produce fluorescence, color, smell, can change the phase changing the materials, or cross-linking materials, and other ways of biosensing and actuation. And this is the, the idea is to embed it into the bioblends of polymers that actually can enhance the function of those biological molecules, and then have differentiated fabrication of like more structural places, and then embedded like active biosites. So we built this multi-scale design process where the biosites, where the cell-free is mixed with the bioblend, the same thing that is 3D printed, and then embedded in those lattices. And here is the first iteration of the lattices, and LAIA will show more the work that she's done in this direction following that. So this is the air. And the next one is the water. So this, if the air project is a research project. So this project is my work with students at RISD, design students from industrial design. And it was funded by Summerson Sustainability Fund that had like two purposes. So one was developing a design intervention. And the second one was connecting to the local communities of Providence. So community engagement. And the project is bioremediation of the Providence River for climate resilience. So these are all the contributors to the project, and this network keeps growing every day. So there is a team of very motivated and very talented students, now not students anymore. And then we had experts from different fields. We had local stakeholders like the Stormwater Innovation Center, Save the Bay. So those agencies that act for local climate resilience in Providence. And then there is a more global network in India, Japan, and recently UK. So the site for intervention is the Providence River. That was historically polluted by textile industries in the area with heavy metals, petroleum products, industrial solvents, and pathogens from the sewage. And one of the reasons that those body of water is very slow to recover is that they lack the ecosystem of wetlands, that it is their main, so it's those transitional ecosystems between the dry land and the water. And the idea was to restore them as floating wetland islands. And we looked at some precedents of that. So those exist on the scale of indigenous knowledge, so built by local communities in many places in the world, but also like governmental intervention on like a larger scale. And our idea was to make those into small models that can be DIY, so built by anyone in the community, and then aggregated in strategic places for both restoration, but also engaging local communities, so for education. So this is a site that we chose, which is a pedestrian bridge that has a lot of traffic of like people coming through. And our the little biopod is built from two main parts. So this is the myco part, which is a mycelium floating mat that allows the system to be floating, so on the water, and also encapsulates all the plants, the wetland plants, and allows the roots to go into the water. So it's a very porous mat. And the vision is that we kind of populate them with plants, and then over time, this ecosystem evolves and mycelium degrades, and then it's to create interconnected fringe marshes. Sorry. So this is the fabrication process of, and the workshop we conducted to create those mushroom mycelium pods. And everything is DIY, as you can see. It's assembling the mold and then filling it with local agricultural waste mixed with mycelium mushroom to grow those porous substrate. And we also developed some fabrication technique to allow more porosity with the wax that is like melting later. So introducing wax channels. And the plants were collected from a healthy ecosystem upstream the river. So those ecosystems evolve over time to, to metabolize the local, to adapt to tidal cycles and adapt to local ecosystems. So they are the best at doing what they need to do. And then we had the launching event when we invited, that was part of the Water Fire Festival that's visited by thousands of people every year. And we put them on the water, and we also had, educational, like a community event. So you can see here, we had the tiny wetlands and the biopods. And we had meetings with stakeholders, so like a more expert audience. And we left them for 2 months on the river. which they survived. And then after that, we did some observation of what happens within the biopod and saw some evidence. So this is not a very scientific research. It was done in a very simple microscopy lab. But to see like that there's sprouting, there's like new growth, there's development of root morphologies. We also observed some accumulation of microplastic and formation of new biofilms. So this is a RISD project. And then the last one is, so here we see how we can, these are DIY methods to utilize the natural capabilities of living cells and living systems to remediate and clean their own environment. And last project I'm going to show is a student project from a class that works with the soil. So looking at the soil as this invisible ecosystem of microbial activity, kind of bringing that to light, so observation and how we can have interventions as designers to work with this ecosystem. So the student mapped out, he was interested how the soil in the polluted urban environment is different from a natural environment. And he did a very old school biological observation by collecting samples, mapping samples, and then plating them and observing what he could observe with like simple microscopy. So what colonies develop, what are the sizes, how they evolve over time. And he noticed that important role played the mycelium. So over time, mycelium kind of overpowered in the healthy soils, mycelium overpowered all the growth. And it did not happen in the poor soils from urban sites. So he did his design intervention of transplanting the mycelium into the polluted urban soils, both in like 2D, by just like cutting some mycelium samples and plating them, and 3D objects. So this is more like an artistic, from observation to an artistic object type of intervention. And then he went on developing it for his master's studies in architecture, working with like another site. So these are some examples on different level of research and technology needed for the project, and also technological development of how we can use air, water, and soil as design intervention with living cells, and using the DNA computation, both native and engineered. So I just want to put this slide for acknowledgement, and you can see I worked with people in many different disciplines, from architecture to design to synthetic biology and material science. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katya. It's great to see the work, and what fascinates me in Katya's work is like going both from the science side to the art. Like you can see like some of her student work that's like very artistic, and then like the really kind of science lab work. So I'd like to invite my colleague Alessandro Melis to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Atina. Thank you very much. Thank you, Katya and Alexandros, for this great beginning of perspective about biomaterials, which are particularly exciting in this moment. I guess many of you are aware about this, from my perspective, groundbreaking publication, paper by Romilo and his team, Living Mass, Artificial Mass, that has been published in Nature in 2020, highlighting the let's say the turning point in 2020 in the fact that for the first time artificial material will overcome in terms of weight the biomaterial, the biomasses. So this is becoming more than an interest, let's say architectural or a technical interest. This is about how to shape our future society. So it's about, if you want, civil engagement activism. So it's very relevant and very exciting to have, let's say, really the cutting edge experiences here at New York Tech. I would like to introduce LAIA MOGAS-SOLDEVILA. She is an assistant professor of graduate architecture and director of the Dumo Lab research at the Stuart Weitzman School of Design at the University of Pennsylvania. LAIA's research focuses on new sustainable material practices, bridging science, engineering, and the arts. Her pedagogy supports novel theory and applied methods, understanding biomaterials and bio-based fabrication in product design and architecture. She has built scholarship over the past 10 years, reconsidering matter as a fundamental design driver and partnering with the scientists to redesign it towards unprecedented environmental attuned capabilities. LAIA holds an interdisciplinary doctorate in material science, biomedical engineering, and arts and craft from Tufts University School of Engineering, 2 master's degree from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and she's a licensed architect with a minor in fine arts by the Polytechnic University of Catalonia School of Architecture in Barcelona and the École Nationale Supérieure des Beaux-Arts in Paris. So the stage is yours, LAIA. Thank you very much for joining us in this symposium.
All right, thank you very much. This is very exciting. We know each other from a long time, but it's amazing to see everybody's work again and how it has evolved. So I teach at Penn and I have a lab on regenerative architecture. And my thesis when I was working with scientists for 5 years was on reviving matter in 2 ways. Reviving matter in design, like reconsidering materials and how we choose them and how we critique them, but also literally reviving matter as living materials in architecture and design. So in the lab, we mix microbiologists and material scientists and architects and designers, lately landscape designers, and we all work together from from science to execution. We look at how materials that we know and love in architecture today are high energy, single function, and have a depleting end of life. And we try to understand why that is. And as Alex was mentioning, it's not that concrete is the enemy, right? It's that we use too much of it, and it's almost a single material for architecture construction today. So if we can replace any of that, if we can change any of that, it's already a win. In the lab, we do take a bit of a more radical approach. Anything that enters our lab, you almost are able to eat it, right? If I can digest it, Earth can digest it. So we work in a very radical approach to let's say, material catalogs. Why? Because in nature, things are self-assembled, as wood and skin, shell and bone. Your bone is replaced every 5 years because your weight changes. Shell cannot crack because of the way it's engineered at the molecular scale. Your skin changes porosity throughout your whole body. And trees are able to negotiate flexibility to strength throughout their whole system. So we're fascinated by that, how that works in nature, and we try to execute it in the lab with very, very simple. That's a nice echo. So it's very, very simple materials as these ones. My favorite ones are cellulose, and silk, and you'll see why in a second. But we try to combine those with almost kitchen elements, right? Starches and pectins, and sometimes natural clays that you find around in nature easily. So these are some of our precursors. And the lab looks like this. It's an industrial kitchen meets, an engineering fabrication fab lab. And we are messy, because we have to be messy because, hi guys, because any of these materials need to thrive in architecture and design and need to be robust enough to withstand, digital fabrication, to withstand my students mixing things up and being very, very, cooking-like about it. So the keywords that drive our research are modification of material families, substitution entirely of things that don't work today, augmentation of materials that we know and love, and interaction such as sensing and adaptation within material systems. So we obsess with how nature builds from the molecule to a complex system in bone, in shell, in bamboo. You have very, very simple cellulose molecules, for instance, that pack into a microfibril that makes then a matrix of those that then are packed into these tower-like systems that negotiate porosity, as Alex was mentioning, in a functionally graded system, which is, for instance, bamboo stems, right? So nature always uses very simple molecules into complex geometric systems. So for designers, complex geometry assembles is something you can understand and can, try to work with. So that's what we obsessed at the beginning with, building these hierarchies. Taking, for instance, chitosan, which is one of these very cool biopolymers that could one day substitute fuel-based plastics. And we started looking at how could we, with a digital fabrication platform that we came up with on 2014, 10 years ago already, how can we assemble that into a robust structure that, is dry in, a man-made environment. And this was at MIT again, like everybody's past work, trying to see how big could we go, how much this little polymer that lives in nature and works very well in nature, could we assemble that as big as a system that today we make with fuel-based plastics. So this was our challenge, and we started making these hierarchies inspired by dragonfly wings and the molecules that I just showed you, and leaf venations in trees, and see if we could make that in an architectural scale. This is how it looks in wet, because this is mostly water. Like you guys, when you're assembled in your mother wombs today, you are mostly water. So how does that dry and stay dry in a predictable shape, right? If any of you has worked with a bioplastic, the moment you cast it in a Petri dish or in a little mold, it makes an unpredictable ball of disaster. So how do you digitally control that in order to, as Alex was mentioning, in order to build these new systems of production, of manufacturing that we so much need for biomaterials to thrive in our economy. So this was one of the results of all of that work. And today I'll walk you through a few projects that have been happening in the lab for the last 2 years that I've been at Penn, looking at how we can substitute or make better all of these materials that we like in architecture. So this set are trying to replace leather materials, so cow and sheep leathers made only with biomaterials. As I told you, we are very radical, so there's no plastic in any of these projects, not even PLA. So we looked at silk protein. Silk protein, so you've always seen a cocoon, right? When you were little, there's this silk cocoon that's strong and has amazing tensile strength, and it's made of 2 proteins. One of it is fibrin, and the fibrin is what makes the fiber that you can unravel from a silk cocoon. There's another one that's the glue. Think of epoxy fiberglass composites, right? So the fiberglass, that's fibrin, amazing properties. So there's a way in biomedical, where I did my PhD, to reverse engineer that protein and get a gel out of it. So you have a silk cocoon, it's jellified. Now you can work with this raw material again, and you can make new products out of it. So that's what we did. Started making these inks that you are able to print in a very precise way. And because silk is awesome, we started getting these basket-like, flexible but strong systems. This is only silk and food color. And soon, because again, we made our own platform, we were able to tune, any designs, any patterns, any behavior within these material systems that were replacing cow and sheep leathers, which, as you know, have many problems for the environment, etc. So we started getting leather-like materials that are able to drape, like cloth, that are able to pipe, to kink, to have different flexibility, different resolution, of course, because we are designing our tools and our tool paths, and also opacity, whatever you want. And later I'll tell you about responsiveness. So this system started feeling like leathers, while they had nothing to do with animal skins, right? And I think by now you might have noticed that things tend to be very beautiful. And why is that? It's not only because I'm a bit obsessive with beauty, but also because if we want this biomaterial revolution to happen, things need to be very appealing to the public, right? So when we try to replace cow and leather, it needs to be as good as an Hermes bag. Otherwise, we will not adopt these things. We will not buy into this revolution. So that's another thing my students strive for. And they are smiling because we require things to be very, very aesthetically pleasing and appealing and new and strange. So these are other leathers we've been working on. These ones are now pH sensing. I'll tell you how in a little bit. But with my students' interests in different aspects of design, this one is one now that makes a stiff corset at the top of the dress, and then accounts for very sinuous biomechanics in the hips, right? So again, another functionally graded example of how nature would have done this, right? If you need to have something stand, you'll make a stronger, more, let's say, more tough material. If you need to accommodate for biodynamics, you'll make a much more flexible blend. And that's exactly how my students do it. They tune the chemistry within these materials. And it's very easy to tune, as I told you, because these are very simple molecules that nature uses all the time. So again, always, every time we invent a new material or a new blend, we compare ourselves to our friends, right? We compare ourselves to cow and sheep, obviously, which tend to win. But we also compare ourselves to anybody that's looking at collagen leathers or bacterial cellulose, pineapple leathers, mycelium leathers, and how do we do? So we do a lot of characterization with our material science colleagues to see how we're doing and how is this positioned in this catalog of other materials around us that are alternatives to X, right? This one here is very recent and I cannot show much, but here we're trying to print wood without plastic. Right? Normally, when you look at, I don't know, anybody has worked with FDM filaments, for the FDM to work, you need some thermoplastic, right? So you need PLA or ABS or any other additive to the mixture that makes your biomass printable. So that's an issue because that becomes, yes, okay, industrially recyclable, but not biodegradable. So if you have heard that PLA is biodegradable, don't believe that. So how can you do this, right? How do you work with wood that's normally glued? Without the glue. So we work again with our friends, which are chitosan, cellulose, and fibrin. Fibrin gives to these mixtures a superior strength, like it does in cocoons. And cellulose and chitosan are the most abundant biopolymers on Earth. I think I was reading the other day that Earth makes cellulose at the same pace as we have made 100 years of plastics, right? Every year, you get 100 years of plastics of cellulose. So it's abundant. It's there. It's just waiting for us to use it into an amazing application. So chitosan is our binder, cellulose is the fiber, obviously, and fibrin is a strengthener whenever we need it. And again, this is a paste that works with a system that does not require heat, that works at ambient conditions and, water-based, obviously. So it's all suspended in a water gel. So as Katia was mentioning, this is the system that was carrying that biology that she mentioned, right? These systems can support life and then can carry those biologies. Here we are obsessing on how to print wood, and that came before that. Of course, my students look at, how do we distribute forces in the system? How can we control these toolpaths? How is material distributed the way nature would do it? This reminds you most likely of a dragonfly wing made into an oval that shapes itself into these different shapes, right? So we are trying to prove that with all of these blends that we design with these very simple 3 materials, we can drape like cloth, but we can also stand like veneer, right? So again, going back to nature's way of grading materials that Alex was talking about, we can now make a truss that turns into a curtain, right? So tuning geometry and tuning the blends we use and using maybe more silk here and more cellulose there, you have suddenly a thing that can support loads at the beginning and become a curtain in your building, so truss to curtain. And I cannot show you more of this because we are in the process of making it, but it's coming soon, and stay tuned for our publications. In another adventure that we are taking, and this also stems from my biomedical years, we're trying to make materials sense the environment, right? All of the biomaterials I told you about are able to encapsulate other molecules that are interesting chemical sensors. So for instance, you can have molecules that heat up with light, molecules that change color with sweat, molecules that change color with heat, molecules that, I don't know, whatever you want, like nature will do it, right? Anything they can sense, they can report. The trick here is to be able to encapsulate that. And we work with silk protein because it's an amazing protein at wrapping around these great molecules that can sense the environment and respond with something we can understand, which is most likely, most of the time, color, right? So you'll see a lot of color coming up. LAIA was part of my PhD, and it was looking at this pH sensing response on large surfaces. If you've ever seen, well, yeah, you've seen many COVID tests and colorimetric paper tests where you dip your typical pH test, you dip that into water and it changes color, right? So that is local. What if you could sense, meters of that? So we've been perfecting these inks, we call them bioinks, in a very robust way, right? Fibrin being our encapsulator and pH sensing inks carrying that molecule that's able to change color with pH, and using a very traditional, in this case, screen printing. No water-based fabrication platform in this project, just simple screen printing that anybody could do. So again, we harness the power of silk to encapsulate important molecules, and we started making these inks with silk precursor, a bit of plasticizer, our molecule, and then screen printing again on silk gown. So you have a silk on silk system that binds itself to the molecular level. Very exciting. So we made bracelets, and in this case, we printed on cotton for shirts, and then quickly we went big. What was I going to say? Yes, this works with sweat. I think you all got it, no? The fluid is sweat. Yeah. So you sweat on it, and then suddenly you have a scarf that you wear during a couple of days, and it changes colors slowly to tell you about your diet, your stress levels, your level of hydration, right? You can map many things if you know how to read this coloration to the patient's health. We made another one in blue. So at the time, I was fascinated by the Pantone colors you can get out of this. And it's not only beautiful, it also maps to, I think, 0.1 changes in pH, right? Really, really, really precise. So of course, the target of this for my science colleagues was that, right? Full body mapping for athletes, for patients, so that we only don't get a little patch point data, which might be, not true because you sweat differently around your body. It was mostly, how can we distribute this sensing? But of course, as an architect, you think, how can we, make canopies out of it? So we started making canopies. We started making 3x1 meter tapestries where we distributed these sensors with artisans in Brooklyn that were like all confused because every time you print this, it changes color on the fly because it hits the pH of the fabric, right? They were like, what's going on? So they were seeing these color changes in real time as they were screen printing these giant tapestries. And we tuned to these colors because, of course, you need 3 scales for, colorblind, et cetera, to be able to map all of these colorations nicely. What was very exciting to me is that this withstands dry cleaning and withstands 9,000 people in 3 exhibits in Barcelona and Athens and Milan, spraying fake sweat, fake rain, fake saliva, and fake tap water onto these things. So of course, it was an exhibit, but it was also a way to explain that, materials that surround us can tell us about the environment. You can map this acidity to pollution in rain. You can map this acidity to harsh chemicals in your tap water. You can map this to your health source through sweat and saliva. So, sensors around us that only work with very simple chemistry. And again, yeah, I'll tell you later. So SenseBiome that Claudia introduced looks at using this system now with air, which is much more difficult, right? One thing is to track a fluid, another thing is to track air. But through COVID, we all, hope that one day this room can change color and tell us if there's a pathogen around, right? So this is what Katia mentioned. We have this vision that we will be able to sense and react to pathogens and toxins in a room and then maybe correct that, right? What if this could clean air? In the meantime, we are not there yet. So we've been, what's going on? We've been looking at aroma active, for instance. Again, I told you silk is an amazing material. It's able to trap molecules within and release them slowly. So we started trapping aroma. We started trapping zingeron, which is a molecule that in the medieval times was thought to repel the pests, right? So you would have a pendant of zingeron that was, repelling pests and pathogens that were trying to attack you through plague. And we thought, why not? So we put this guy into a blend of chitosan cellulose fibroin prints, and we started releasing those aromas into the ICA opening during the Acadia conference at Penn, and starting to test how these work. They still smell, they still work. So it's actually I have a sample from 2013 where I had Chanel No. 5 in silk, and it still smells there. So it's an amazing encapsulator. What happened with silk fibroin is that today it's still expensive to extract and work with, but we're getting there with our partners at Phenom. So these were the smell active materials. And here, of course, why smell, right? Because it could change mental health state. It could change, and we are working now with neuroscience to see if it could change the mental state of drug addiction recovery patients in what they are doing. They are calling today biophilic rooms. Can these biophilic rooms that are only used, through images of nature also work at the chemical level with this aroma intensive materials that use healthy chemistries instead of, nasty diffusers, etc. So here we're doing another level of environmental tracking for health, and we're looking at solar active materials. This was at the Milan Design Week, where we used, again, my 3 favorite materials, well, actually 2. Chitosan cellulose silk was too expensive for this. And we embedded UVR pigment with Crafting Plastics, which was our partner. They did what is not biodegradable, which is the PHA, PLA white skeleton where this was cast. Okay, I didn't know this had sound. Let me advance. So what you see here is Milan UVI index, right? The index of radiation in the city of Milan in last spring. And we mapped that to the colors that would change in real time on our lattices. So the sensor changes color when it feels harmful radiation, which is the one that damages your skin and your eyes. And it changes in real time to tell you that. Sorry about that. So here you see it changing. This is not speed up. So the moment you open your window or you move your curtain, this guy is going to change, and it's going to match that index that you get on your phone when you check UVI today, right? So again, another maybe silly installation to tell the public and see how they react to the idea that the materials around us can tell us about invisible threats, about health, about other environmental variables without the use of electronics, etc., just with very simple chemistries and biomaterial blends. And this is how this looked in Milan. Terrain goes a bit more deeper in the amount of substitution, and here we are looking at substituting concrete, right? So using earth-based materials for compression-dominant shell structures without rebar. So no steel, no external material reinforcement. What we use here are sands and soils, a biopolymer binder, long and short fibers. So we have a multi-scale material that can take, when we say compression dominant, we mean there will be some tension, there will be some bending that concrete would not be able to take, but that this material would, right? So here we are, that's how my students work, very intuitively. They start blending things together and seeing, I have my fiber, I have my binder, I have my plasticizer, I have these other modifiers, which is the best blend. The way they know which is the best blend is they break them. They make a bunch, as Vavna and Spurti know, they make a bunch and they break them at the laboratory for the structure of matter at Penn, and they realize which is the one that performs the best for the application, which might be compression, tension, bending, decay, etc., right? So here we're looking at this compression dominant structure, but if you have a bit of, you remember your structures design class, there is some undercut, right? There is some bending here and some tension that this structure is taking. And how do we get to that with only sand and fibers? Well, we get to that with the invention of a bilayer. So we used sand, again, fiber, citric acid, just plasticizers, and the biobinder, and also an underlayer of burlap fabric, which is just woven natural fiber. So we started thinking, how does this work? So how is this going to work? How is we going to suspend this sand? We're going to use these fibers. And we thought this was working like this, but no, it was actually working like that. So once we investigated under a microscope, what happens is that your sand is suspended in this porous structure with these capillary bridges of chitosan and some and the fibers just go through. And sorry for geeking out because this was an amazing moment of discovery. This you can see here now how this, again, water-based material dries out and assembles into a super cohesive sand structure. If you've ever made a sand castle, you know how delicate that is, right? But this was not. This was rock solid. It was super exciting. I'm trying to wake you up. So we tested all of this again to all the materials that were happening around us, right? So we tested this at flexural strength, which again, concrete can barely take. And we saw that if steel fiber reinforced concrete is at 6.1 megapascals, we were at 5.2, right? Without any of that cement and steel. So we were very happy. And of course, we started comparing to our friends, to hempcrete and barley fiber sand, earth, Martian regolith, banana fiber cement, all of these other guys that are starting to look at replacements for concrete. In compression, of course, concrete will always win, right? But it was not so bad. So we started thinking about other aggregations, and this is with our friends at the Polyhedral Structures Lab. They work with graphic statics, so they helped us find this minimal material maximum performance shape for our material to thrive, right? So again, yes, we are inventing new materials, but we're also trying to use the least amount of them. So geometry is our friend most of the times. And again, also, how can we make an inflatable or reusable formwork that avoids any material waste? So we started working with inflatable technologies. And now imagine you enter this building, right? And you breathe. There's no fire retardants, there's no glue, there's no off-gassing of strange molecules. You only have burlap and sand and fibers and this very nice finish that I really like. And in the outside, you have the sand that is rock solid at this moment after curing. So this summer, my students worked on making a large scale of it. Again, this is 2 millimeters almost thick, and it feels like you have cast stone. And this is, oops, and this is them. So instead of using an inflatable this time, we used almost like a tent, very simple tent system that was just guiding this, again, water-based material, how to dry, and then we could remove the skeleton and use it for another project. You see how thin the burlap underlayer is. And you can appreciate the short and long fibers that allow for this to take some of the tension I was mentioning. Anyhow, this was a good adventure, and it's still in the lab. Every time we invite someone, we make them, knock on how hard this is. Anyhow, this is for the future, looking at making a larger structure with a giant hole, demonstrate that this can take other loads, hopefully next year. And let me see. How am I doing with time? I think I need to stop. I had another couple projects that we can just talk about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, LAIA, for the beautiful work. And we can hold the comments for after the break. So we're going to have a 10-minute break now. Or if we have any leftover fruits and cookies and coffee, you are free to have. And we'll be back for the rest of the presentation.
Did you see? Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like illustrating one, they don't want to do weird shapes.
Yeah, like 9 minutes. The same.
It's screen time.
I remember
Yes, I saw it. Stay there a little bit.
All right. I was thinking about you when live. Not only about you.
I mean, it's something. You're gonna say, this building, right? It's not really. It's not like I know. Then what you need. Yeah, we talked. Yeah. He was trying to one line yeah. No, no. The second. Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, we are really. It's awesome.
Now they want to go back.
You gotta give it that. It's actually it's saw your story and I was like, it's just I was I didn't just say that it's so hard.
I'm not the friend.
Very good.
I have 17 sites. Never ULA. Yes, it's a
Organizers. Yeah, we started. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Did you see great things?
Yeah. I see. I ended up.
There's one.
Yeah, you see, okay, great, that's right.
You know, this
Like yeah, like.
But that's not restricted.
But
Hello, 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 hello. See, this is not working. Oh my God. Hello, hello, hello. Yes. This is good.
Hello, everyone. We are ready to continue our event. So please try to come back to your seat. It's your turn. It's your turn. I was ready to invite it's you.
How's Dennis doing?
Yeah.
I have to visit again. I'm there all the time looking to find Bernie.
Get everybody, thank you. Back. Thank you, Professor, I appreciate it.
You can
And they might have been there. And then everything turned out, I was like.
How do you like it? I mean, I'm from.
Yes.
Activities.
Yeah.
It's me.
All right, so I'm going to invite our colleague, Director of the Interior Design, Florencia Vetter, to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Athena. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I just want to say how amazing the work that is being presented as a interior design department director for our students in the interiors world, the materials, and how to create this biodynamic environments have been very inspiring to see all this amazing work. So thank you very much. And I will now introduce Catherine Murphy. Catherine has led educational programming at Parsons Healthy Materials Lab since 2017. Alongside, she is an adjunct faculty at Parsons School of Design and Columbia GSAP. Teaching classes on material where she guides the development of methodologies to eliminate toxics and reduce environmental impacts. She credits her upbringing in the west of Ireland countryside with her deep-rooted interest in materials, circularity, and craft. Her practice integrates design, project management, and materials consultancy, drawing from 12 years of experience in designing healthier and sustainable buildings. Catherine works exclusively in renovations and reuse utilizing her background in textiles and handcraft to repair existing structures while implementing core design and construction techniques for healthier and sustainable built environments. Catherine holds a Master of Fine Arts in Interior Design from Parsons School of Design and a degree in Fine Craft Design from the University of Ulster in Ireland. So we welcome Catherine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. So I'm really delighted to be here and amongst such great talent. It's been a very exciting and interesting couple of hours. So this whole afternoon has been fantastic. So thank you again for the invitation. So Parsons Healthy Materials Lab is in downtown in Parsons, and it's a design research lab, and it was established in 2015. And our thinking was to put human and environmental health right at the center of all the design decisions that we make as architects and designers. Our goal specifically is to support the design of building healthier homes, communities, and environments. We're invested in a future where all people and the planet will thrive. We're a collective of faculty, full-time and postgraduate researchers, student researchers, and a committee of expert advisors from a variety of different fields. In all of our work, we evaluate materials at every stage of their life cycle through the lens of human exposure, so from the extraction of raw materials through production, installation, and disposal. And I'll come back a couple of times to this idea of looking at things through the whole life cycle. It's really, really important to us. We're always asking sort of critical questions. We're always asking questions, you know, what impact does a material have on waste, on water, on the soil systems, social equity, carbon emissions, and the health of other people and living beings throughout its life cycle. And in all of that, we're always advocating for material transparency. So we always want to know what's in all of the materials that we use. Today, I want to show share some great strides that are happening in the development of healthier materials. But first, I want to point out some of the more sort of complex, intertwined, and underlying issues of our time. And this is really the reason behind the Healthy Materials Lab. It's that our profession of design and architecture contributes to some of the critical global problems that we're now faced with. So in this current era of the Anthropocene, we're living at a time where the action of humans have overtaken the natural cycles of our planet's ecosystem. So let's take the climate crisis, for example. We hear it all the time in the media. Carbon emissions are rising at an alarming rate, and as a result, weather systems are wreaking havoc on communities. We don't hear every day about how design is implicated. Buildings generate nearly 40% of the annual global carbon emissions. And with the new global building floor area expected to double by 2060, that number is going to grow. In addition, 31% of global greenhouse gas emissions are related to making stuff, the building products, furnishings, and accessories. So the things that we purchase and design with. Waste is another example. Every year nationwide, the construction and demolition industry sends more than 600 million tons of waste to landfills. And according to the EPA, 22% of that waste is from home remodeling. A central concern, less discussed in the headlines, are the environmental justice issues associated with waste, plastics especially. It's becoming the landscape of people's lives, and it's full of toxic chemicals. Because of our mass consumption and few solutions for waste, our ecosystem is also filling up with microplastics. And while I'm aware that, you know, a lot of you in the room, if not all of you in the room, are kind of aware of this, it's really sort of kind of mainstream that it's all sort of new-ish information, certainly the details of it. So these are stark facts, and most of us as designers and manufacturers don't realize how our work is impacting ecologies or human health issues. It's important to know because the entire design industry has a huge opportunity right now to contribute to a better future. Designers in particular have a huge role to play. The materials and building products that we choose to make our buildings from have a huge impact. Our design decisions influence the manufacturing industry, our ecosystem, and people's health. The basis for our work at the lab is rooted in this statistic. We're the first generation to spend 90% of our time indoors. And the air inside is known to be 3 to 5 times more polluted than outdoor air. So the question is, what's in our interior air? As designers, we choose materials and products intended to bring comfort, well-being, excitement, and interesting aesthetics to other people. The problem is that there's a lot of invisible things that are brought into our spaces with our material choices. It's not obvious what they are, and they can affect people's health and well-being. Scientists and public health officials have been referring to this as the silent epidemic. Harmful substances can arrive in a room if we're not careful about our decisions. So those substances are flame retardants, perfluorinated stain treatments, or PFAS, added formaldehyde, and substances in plastics like phthalates or bisphenol. So for example, phthalates are used to make plastics flexible and are found in products such as carpet backing, adhesives, and paints. Bisphenols are used to make plastics rigid and hard. So they're found in products such as epoxy paint, laminates, grout, or solid surface countertops. Exposure to phthalates and bisphenols are linked to neurodevelopmental problems. They harm reproductive development in boys. They decrease sperm count in men. They're attributed to obesity and diabetes, increased allergies and asthma. So as designers, we have to ask questions about the things that we're bringing into spaces. What's in the air? What's in the dust? What are in the places we design and that we live with? A good analogy is the food movement. We do know what's inside food products. The FDA requires that ingredients of consumable food products are labeled on the packaging. So before eating, many of us will kind of look to see what's inside on the back of the ingredients. And we'll decide it's okay to ingest red number 40 as it is here, because, you know, I'm okay with it because I really want a Dorito. But you make that decision. You have the ability to make that decision. Regulation on building products are almost non-existent, and many people don't know how to ask for product ingredients. All these materials that we design and build with are becoming part of our biological systems. So if we are where we eat, as the saying goes, then we are where we live. So how does this happen? Over time, materials around us break down and the substances within are released into indoor air through off-gassing, as particles or dust, or as the chemical bonds themselves become disconnected within the products. Once the chemicals are loose in interior space, we can breathe them in, we can ingest them, and they can be absorbed through our skin. Here are some examples of products that are typically used in current construction, which contain chemicals that are linked to different diseases. Today, we're surrounded by synthetic materials made from chemicals derived from petroleum. They started coming into our homes in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. With the invention of modern additives, all kinds of new materials were invented, like foams and adhesives. This wasn't always a problem. For centuries before World War II, people used many more benign materials and products in building. People around the world used durable materials that were found locally to build their homes. New technology made our shelters more weather and pest resistant. With the innovation of synthetic chemicals, building materials became more efficient. And I put that kind of in parentheses. It's just been 80 years since all of this development. And in that time, we've been kind of living with this increase in petrochemically derived polymeric materials like plastics, rubbers, thermoplastics, adhesives, foams, paints, and sealants, the ones I had listed here on this slide. And they represent the highest growth area in construction materials and consumer products at the moment. So we assume that the materials and products we buy have been tested for safety. But most chemicals commonly used in building and consumer products in the United States are not regulated for their impact on human health or the environment. Only 250 of the 86,000+ chemicals currently in use are tested, and only 5 have been partially restricted by law. Many of these chemicals have an impact on human health, thus our work at HML and our need as designers to be vigilant. Our colleagues at the Green Science Policy Institute came up with a 6-class system to group chemicals on the market into six distinct categories. Because as you can imagine, how to track what's happening when you're talking in the tens and thousands of chemicals is really challenging. So this is a very clever way that they've done it at GSPI. So they each have 6 short videos that give a really brilliant introduction. They're in the region of 3 minutes long each, describing the chemicals to avoid, which diseases they're linked to, and you can find these on their website, which is sixclasses.org. All of this to say, there are many things to consider when specifying a seemingly simple building product. So let's look at LVT, for example. I've chosen it because it's one of the fastest growing products on the market, and it's used in a wide variety of settings. And there are over 5 billion square feet of it imported into the US every year. Looking at LVT through the lens that I showed you earlier helps us to evaluate it at every stage of its life cycle. So if we start by asking, what is it made of? We can see a variety of materials present in a single piece of LVT. And in each of these layers, there are chemical additives which are known to have harmful effects on people who are exposed over a period of time. All of these are made from fossil fuels. And our colleagues at the Center for Environmental Health have recently released an in-depth report looking at the true cost of LVT. There's the cost of health. So an essential ingredient of PVC called chloroprene is produced in St. Gabriel, Louisiana, pictured here, and the factory is adjacent to many homes. Chloroprene is used to make vinyl for resilient flooring, flooring adhesives, and other flexible products like neoprene. It's released into the air during the production process. As a result, this community is suffering a cancer rate of 7 to 8 times that of the rest of the US. A resident described this town as the cancer capital of the US. And it's part of a corridor between New Orleans and Baton Rouge, nicknamed Cancer Alley, which you might be familiar with. There's also the cost of carbon emissions. Research findings also show that LVT has a heavy carbon footprint, despite their messaging claiming the opposite. So fossil fuels are used to power the factories, to make the ingredients, and to transport the products and raw materials. In the near future, plastics production from petrochemicals is destined to be the largest emitter of greenhouse gases. The plastics lifestyle is threatening our ability to meet global climate targets. PVC, the main substance used to make LVT, is one of the plastics that cannot be recycled because of its chlorine content. So when it gets removed during interior renovations, LVT flooring gets tossed out and ends up in the landfill, where it's exposed to weather and sun. LVT becomes brittle, leaching microplastics into our water and our soil systems, which eventually harm all of us because the global systems are integrally connected. And what about the people who make the material in the factories? So in order to keep up with the demand for LVT in North America, a new report reveals that people right now are being forcibly taken from their homes and moved to forced labor programs in factories to make LVT in northwestern China. In our work to find alternatives, we look closely at what every product is made of. In so-called luxury vinyl tile, the main ingredients is PVC, whereas in Cork's liquid lino, the main ingredients is oil from castor beans and linseed oil. Duracryl's Cork liquid lino resilient flooring behaves like a poured epoxy floor, but healthier. It's made of the castor and linseed oil, calcium carbonate, and cork. It reduces waste because it's poured into place and only what's needed is used. It's comparatively priced, and it's also available in a terrazzo version. Linoleum, for example, is a resilient floor made of better ingredients too. It's made from plants and minerals, so flaxseed oil and wood flour. And it stands the test of durability and longevity, which makes it a better, healthier flooring. So our goal is to find better products, and better means that they need to meet aesthetic and durability expectations while being healthier for humans and the planet. This is from our website in part of our material collection. So we list healthier material examples on the website, prioritizing transparency. And so you can see here on the bottom right, on the bottom left is the material composition, and then on the right is the ingredient transparency with the certification and declaration. So your declare label and EPD, SDS. So thankfully now ingredient disclosures are emerging for building materials. So even in the time that I've been with the lab, which has been since its beginning, there's been a huge increase in the availability of information. And that's, part of our work is, all of our work, in fact, is to disseminate that. But there's more information out there now to share. And a lot of the disclosures that are emerging are voluntary and not necessarily required, but more manufacturers are interested in sharing them. But that still puts the onus on us as designers to keep asking the questions, keep asking for the information. What are the ingredients? So here on the left, there's a declare label and an EPD for Mafi natural wood flooring. And on the right, there's a HBD for LVT. So even though there is a HBD for a product, it doesn't mean that it's healthier. It just means that they've declared the ingredients in it. So our work as designers, we have to go back and read through the ingredients and make our assessment on whether or not we will use it. So we thought at the lab, what if instead of sifting through lists of chemicals and figuring out what's bad, if we could also look for ingredients that are benign in the first place? So one material that we're really excited about is hemp lime, and sometimes you might have heard it referred to as hempcrete. Its ingredients contain no toxic chemicals, they're biodegradable, and create no waste. The ingredients are a plant and a mineral, hemp and lime, and water. And instead of being a slightly better alternative, it provides a truly healthier alternative. And it has so many great qualities. It's recyclable and biodegradable. It regulates humidity and climate. It absorbs CO2. It's thermally efficient, fire, mold, and pest resistant, and long lasting. Hemp lime is used in insulation, and it's incredibly energy efficient from production through to in-use to disposal. So we wanted to try it in a housing experiment. We're interested in the renovation of existing buildings because renovation has a much lower carbon footprint than new construction. And in collaboration with Dawn Services, a community organization in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, we renovated a small home with a hemp lime retrofit. Here's a wall fully packed with hemp lime as insulation, and most of that insulation was sprayed in place. When hemp lime is finished with lime plaster, the visual, acoustic, and visceral effects are really magical. Lime, as part of the mix, is a very effective alternative to plastic-based wall surfaces. Lime is a material that's been used for many applications in the building industry, historically and currently. Paints, plaster, mortars, stucco, and 15% of the Earth's crust is made of limestone. Junsara Ruth, our design director, spent an intensive year exploring its full life cycle and its applications around the world. One great example of its use is in Axel Verwoerd's Canal Studio and Gallery in Belgium, which opened in 2017. Their lime plaster and paint walls are treated as an art form. In India, there are exceptional examples of fine lime plasterwork found in almost every ancient fort and palace. This one was created 5,000 years ago. On the interiors of palaces, they incorporated pigments and painting and inscribing techniques into the lime plaster. How amazing would it be to have some of these techniques brought back into our current practices? This is a historic home in southern Italy. I, too, use lime paints and plasters in all of my design projects. This is a lime plaster interior for private residence in Harlem. And a mineral paint finish in a workplace project in Greenpoint, New York. Another promising material ingredient is mycelium. You heard it mentioned earlier. So it's a naturally occurring ingredient used to make new, healthier, biodegradable materials. As you saw on the earlier slide, it's that network of fibers that spread kind of underground between mushrooms. Lately, many companies are harnessing mycelium. Mogu is an Italian company that's an early adopter, creating flooring and acoustical wall and ceiling tiles from mycelium. Danielle Trofe, that you might know of, is growing mycelium into molds and has created a lighting fixture company with these mycelium lampshades. Mei-Ling Loko is an architectural scientist, designer, and professor at Yale who works with agro-waste and renewable bio-based materials. Here are examples of her experiments with creating mycelium wall panels. Julie Lowen is working with sea kelp to make all kinds of things. This is her installation at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. There's also a new wall insulation made of seaweed. We have samples of it in the materials library, and amongst many other kind of innovative building products. Algae might be the ingredient that replaces plastic-based foams and adhesives. A biochemistry lab in UC San Diego has been developing adhesives and foams with similar performance characteristics to plastics, yet are made of algae. This is a beautiful example of designer Charlotte McCurdy's show on how algae can be used for apparel design. So making healthier, sustainable design begins one material at a time. and one decision at a time. It could simply be a change of a single material, avoiding one harmful chemical class, or implementing a new strategy. Every change makes a huge impact. And that's something I really want to stress. When you're talking in scale, when we're building, it's it's not just one can of paint. You're talking about changing the materials on up to 5 surfaces in a room, and over the scale of the project, that can be really transformative. And as I say to my own students, there's nothing, as a designer, there's nothing that's more powerful to me than to walk off a job site, know that I've made a difference in what I've brought into it. So even across the scale of the product or across the scale of the firm, you can each make a really huge impact. So a great step towards healthier design is avoiding harmful chemicals. And by avoiding stain repellents, these are the PFAS chemicals and flame retardant chemicals in upholstery, for example, we can literally avoid pounds of toxic chemicals from entering people's homes. Using mechanical fasteners instead of adhesives also prevents a significant amount of harmful substances from entering homes. And simply choosing plywood without added formaldehyde is a great step to creating healthier indoor air. Avoiding stone sealers that contain PFAS chemicals is another huge step towards creating healthier interiors. Another strategy is simplifying the materials palette and identify only healthier materials. In this renovation of a Parsons head office, we collaborated with a Parsons grad, Jordan Mays-Gut, to design the space. We chose the materials. We encouraged her to design the furniture with disassembly in mind, because then a product can be broken down into components at the end of its use, and they can be reused or recycled. It's much harder to disassemble when adhesives are used, which in themselves can have harmful compounds. This is a great historical example. It's a building designed to be disassembled. It was made of cast iron parts in 1849. It was disassembled in 1971, and the parts were reused. Material health is really just a way of thinking, which informs your decision-making process. Transforming your thinking and design process can make profound differences in people's lives and well-being. If we become super conscious about all of our choices, what we purchase, where we buy from, and what the supply chain is, how we can minimize waste in really creative ways, then our work can have a huge positive impact for our planet and the society. As designers and architects, we ask questions all the time. But it's a new practice for designers to ask some of these material questions. And we need to make a practice of asking critical questions about materials we select to make healthier spaces for everyone. The questions are simply, what is it made of? How is it made? Where is it made? Does it require a finish? Who will be exposed? And where does it go at the end of its useful life? At HML, we share collections of materials and products, which we rigorously evaluate for their contents and for their impact on human health and climate health. At the Learning Hub on our website, we offer online courses on healthier building materials and how to incorporate them and material health thinking into practice. Hand on heart, I can say that we offer the most comprehensive education in this area. And I can say that because we've been doing it for 7 years, and we have literally had thousands of architects and designers take our courses. We try to keep as much as our information free and widely available. We have lots of events like these coming up. Tomorrow, we will be in conversation with Wanda Della Costa, who's the first First Nations architect in Canada. And she works in between Phoenix and Calgary. And we constantly run events through the year. We have a book, Material Health, Design Frontiers. It's a publication with 6 main topic areas and 19 authors, with examples of healthier, sustainable design and material innovations. So in review, there are many ways that you can take your first step. And even to take one of these is a really brilliant first step. So we're constantly updating our website with new resources and the courses. So I encourage you to kind of check it out, because we will add new things weekly, and hope you'll come and join us. You can also come to the library. As students, you're free to come down and visit it at 25 East 13th Street. So just to finish up, material health is really just a way of thinking. Transforming your design process can make profound differences in people's lives and well-being. If we become super conscious about all of our choices, what we purchase, where we buy from, the supply chain, then our work can have a huge positive impact on our planet and society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for sharing the important work you do at the Healthy Materials Lab, but also for sharing this very informative framework on identifying healthy materials that really puts in context the work we've been discussing today. So I'd like to invite my colleague Marcela Del Signore, who's a director in urban design, to introduce our next speaker. Here you are.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. Great to see everyone. So it's very exciting to be here and I really see this amazing presentation this afternoon, really working across scales from the macroscopic scale, material building component to cities. So it's very exciting, and to see how this is connected, to all the work that we do in the school, but also in the everywhere. So it's my pleasure to introduce Mitchell Joachim. He's the co-founder of Terraform One and associate professor of practice at NYU. He held noteworthy leadership role as a university senator and co-chair of global design at NYU. He worked as an architect and professional offices of Frank Gehry, Moshe Safdie, and I.M. Pei. He won many awards, including the Fulbright Scholarship, Lafarge Holcim Acknowledgement Prize, Ove Aru Foundation Grant, Architect R&D Award, AIA New York Urban Design Merit Award, Victor Papanek Social Design Award, Zoom Tobel Award for Sustainability, History Channel Infinity Award for City of the Future, and Time Magazine Best Invention with MIT Smart Cities. He was featured in numerous articles and co-authored 4 books: Supercell, Building with Biology, Global Design, Elsewhere Envisioned, XXL, XS, New Direction in Ecological Design, and Design with Life, Biotech Architecture and Resilient Cities. His design work has been exhibited in numerous locations, including MoMA, NAI in Rotterdam, Seoul Biennale, and Venice Biennale, among others. He was the Frank Gehry Chair at the University of Toronto and faculty at Pratt, Columbia, Syracuse, RPI, Washington, St. Louis, Cornell, Parsons, and EGS. He earned a PhD from MIT, MAUD at Harvard, and MArch at Columbia University with honors. Welcome, Mitch. The podium is yours.
Thank you very much. Super glad to be here. Thank you, Marcela, for inviting me. Thank you, Maria, to the dean. And certainly many of my colleagues and friends are here. I wasn't able to see the presentations, but I know them really well. And if I don't know your work, I have Google stalked you profoundly, because I think this conference is incredible and I'm glad to be a part of it. And looking forward to dinner sort of shortly with many of you. So that's the introduction. This is our latest book. Feel for students, if you don't want to buy it, that's fine. ACTAR doesn't like when I say this, but I'll send you a PDF for free. I understand you have no money. I was a student for 13 years. I get it. Otherwise, everyone else, purchase it. It'll make them happy. We're not making any money with it. Here's my slide of the big negative issues. 1.5 degrees Celsius mean average temperature permanently globally as of February 8th last month. That's it. That's what the Paris Accord was about. Now we've reached that point. This is where potentially coral life crashes. Worst news ever. Almost as bad as 400 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere and the Keeling curve. So the circumstances are dire. Climate change is real. Biodiversity is an even bigger problem, especially when you talk about health and materials. 11 billion humans on the planet. For so many people in this room, from interior designers, architects, planners, what have you, we have a big job ahead of us when we double the amount of traffic in our streets and we think of massive amounts of housing and 1/3 of the world's population living on less than $1 a day. This is unacceptable. This is our mission as citizens of this earth. There's another issue that we work with at Terraform, our 501c3 nonprofit, which is most of wildlife since the 70s. That's 50 to 60% of all wildlife on this planet has disappeared permanently extinct. That's roughly, depending on how you count, and that's controversial, but every 9 minutes to 14 minutes, another species goes extinct forever. That is an issue. Here's a little bit of a sign of hope. That says design against extinction, if we can move the Zoom thing away, but whatever. That is our motto. We are working to use the power of imagination and the forces of science that we can apply through the building professions to make a difference. Here's some biologists doing their job, saving a white rhino from extinction. It's not Jurassic Park. It's pretty close. It's in vitro fertilization from a fertilized egg from the northern white rhino, which is almost completely gone, effectively extinct. There's only 2 left, a mother and a daughter. And this has been through a surrogate rhino of a different species, an egg that had lived up to this state, and they're getting closer every day to bringing these rhinos back. But considering the amount of species that we do need to save, it's nowhere near enough. We call this kind of design multi-species design or trans-species design, and certainly I'll take socio-ecological design or sustainability. We didn't quite name it. It just sort of described our work after years of doing this kind of thing and caring about it a lot. We work with all kinds of fabrication-based technologies. Our latest thing is this awfully expensive 3D clay printer that we use both digital and analog. We impregnate it with seeds. We make all kinds of shapes and geometries, not just for human usage, but for programmatic use for all kinds of other species that don't necessarily have a voice, for designing habitats for things to get a chance to survive, like monarch butterflies. So we're working with Acetobacter, chitosan, mycelium. We've heard some of these things. We're on the hemp train, love it, whatever version it is. We're also using that with parametrics and all kinds of computation. We're not discarding the last 100 years of improving how we design things. We're just using materials that have been around for a long time and figuring out where best they can be deployed. So here is an example of one of our multi-species walls. This is designed for different types of lizards and salamanders and monarch butterflies. It incorporates jute that's hand woven, which is, craft is an amazing thing when humans can do it. Although the people from Pratt were able to get a robot to do a specific type of crocheting. We thought no one could replicate crocheting in any mechanical means. It has never been done before up until like a week ago. So, great for the folks in Pratt. We still do it by hand because we're designing things that have the least possible impact with the greatest possible benefit. We'll do things like this. This is the anti-extinction library done for the folks at TED. Inside this particular system is a cryogenically preserved frozen egg of a local species near you that's about to disappear forever. The egg is made of paraffin waxes, it's mycelium, has a honeycomb cardboard. Over 7 years, there's a countdown to eventually it exposes all the biomass and the precious eggs inside that are meant to be released, giving that organism a chance to come back sort of from the dead. It's not going to save that organism. It's designed to be put in public spaces or other areas where people can read what's on the sign or the QR tag and learn that these things are disappearing and what you could do immediately, which is probably vote for the right politician so we don't have these problems in the first place. And looking at all different types of different materials that make sense for the Earth's metabolism. So here is mycelium, which we were working with, I think like since 2005 or 6. And now everyone's doing that, and that is awesome. The more people doing this, the better. We combined it into a novel biopolymer with acetobacter, and we thought, what can we make with this? We entered the International Genetic Engineering Machines competition. The lead PI for this group was a poet, somehow able to cut through all the stuff we were talking about, the science and the design and what Zaha wants, and just thought we can make a chair. People will understand that. And that's what we did. So here's the entire history of chair design in one slide. This is 19th century and earlier, which is bespoke, handcrafted objects where there's a relationship between the person that makes it and the object itself. That was a good moment in human history. 20th century, also love it. I have a big fetish for Charles and Ray Eames and Gropius, et cetera. These are unitized, highly manufactured volumes that come out and produce things with materials that we're finding out to be somewhat poisonous. The 21st century is growing these materials on some level and producing chairs that were made inside a lab. Like this one, the first one we made out of mycelium and acetobacter for my older daughter in kindergarten. This is a chair you can eat. And she told her classmates, Daddy makes chairs that are edible and you can eat your crayons and your glue. Life is different. What can that mean for full-size adults? Here is a triply curved mycelium chair. This is now 12 years old, and it looks just the same. When we're done with this chair, we throw into a garden. It feeds thousands of other forms of life as it composts naturally back into the earth. It's made of plyboo and essentially reishi. Then a project I've been working on for an incredibly long time. I do not suggest ever doing this since my time at MIT. Had an idea for Habitat for Humanity, homes that are grown into the landscape where there's no distinction between landscape and home, using a 2,500-year-old technology, maybe even older than that, grafting or pleaching. Grafting inosculate matter to form one contiguous vascular system. That came up with this concept called the Fab Trehab, growing homes from woody plant structures. And that's nothing new. And by the way, this invention, the tree, is incredible. It works at room temperature. It stops flooding. It feeds all kinds of creatures. It affects the acidity level in the soil. It produces oxygen, sequesters carbon. This is quite an amazing piece of technology, better than the stuff you buy at Home Depot. And we compared this to what you do get that's out there and available. So this one's the low-hanging fruit, concrete and steel column, no good, very CO2 intensive. Then the idea of CLT and what we could do with lumber, much better, sequesters carbon, but remember it's dead. And because of scales of economy, Southern white pine, as examples, killed after 20 years. We chop it down and stop it from doing its work in nature. So it does sequester carbon, it traps it in for as long as that material's around, but it's no longer working. Wild living woody plant technology, or what's called ELMs, engineered living materials, ELMs, work and continue to produce a positive contribution to the environment until they die naturally. So we're getting an extra 50 to 100 years of carbon sequestration from them. So here's an idea of a house. The year 2 is wrong, but we put in CNC milled scaffolds. We use fabrication to predict the growth of trees and create diagrid structures, and then eventually remove those scaffolds and have homes made entirely out of living materials. So here's an overly simplified slide to explain the benefits of a wood frame home with 20 dead trees versus an alive frame structure with 140 living trees, from energy to biodiversity conservation, lifespan, recyclability. The chances of doing something as a positive benefit for the environment are enormous. We have experimented and produced an enormous amount of failures. This is my failure slide. This is the stuff, the wrong directions, the bad advice that I gave myself and the team on what to do when it comes to growing woody plant structures and using them in engineering and architecture. So here we're looking at ultrasonic misters, dark chambers, bioreactors. We worked with a group of Israelis that were very good at some of this stuff. Things that expandable systems that grow single tap roots that are essentially the nature of a tree is to grow one singular root, searching for soil in the darkness and in some kind of mist of water, and growing very long to 3 meters in length, and then pulling them out of that dark, moist chamber like this wet spaghetti noodle and shaping them to any computational geometry we want. And then as soon as it touches the soil, it lignifies. Leaf propagation starts to happen. Bark is created. It gets much stronger. And we thought that was an amazing way to create a living engineered architecture. It still takes a lot of time, an enormous amount of curmudgeons point that out. I get it. And then sort of we worked with AI variants of this. AI is going to replace all our jobs, myself included, but unbelievably good as far as looking at how you can triangulate these kinds of systems. And then we came across this, which is biomass farms grow dicots to 35 feet in length, and then they're harvested. They're harvested and pelletized, used to make renewable energy, agriculture to energy for wood stoves, etc. We were able to harvest these same plants on day one, have a living architecture at 30 plus feet in height. Then we graft crown to base, and we can make all kinds of structures. Then we had to work on this modular scaffolding system. Lots of flourishing moments in design there, not correct, but we worked at scale with living plant materials. We looked at different solutions about alive architectures, incorporating notions of coconut husks as the infill material to the structure, and the center system would be more conventional, the bathrooms and the kitchens. That could be done in a more traditional, sustainable approach. This was the original concept for an alive home that we had produced. And then we eventually got to the funding and growing one in upstate New York. So these were the solutions based on the PSI and the strength of trees, the plant biodynamics, and what limits they could be tested to, and what is comfortable for trees to grow on angles and arches. They do that, but not all the time. So here is the arches in place. Then we weave the tree system in place, and then we remove those scaffolds. All is left is the multi-species walls for all types of creatures being held up by clusters of woody plants. Some of them will die. That is okay. That mass gets absorbed by the living matter and continues to grow over time. We've decided to pre-grow villages made out of these living homes. So obviously we've done a number of renderings. I'm done with renderings from I just want to build and make and grow stuff. That's what we did. Hopefully this video plays. I don't know, but this is the Fab Tree Hab with the multi-species wall system in place, growing with clusters of willows. It's 128 trees on this thing, grafting together and alive. It looks, well, some people say there's too much wood. I don't see the trees. Where's the fuzzy green bits? What was the New York Times called the shaggy architecture with green stuff? Well, it's not there yet. We just finished December 18th. It's winter, so seasons change. It's not green. It will be in like 3 months, and I can't wait to show that photo. But we're almost there. The second tier is already being planted. That gets grafted to the lower tier, so we can get 40-foot, 50-foot long trees. They will continue to change in girth over time. Let me see if this plays. Oh, great. Oh, the music is bad. How do I kill that? That was me in shorts. That's us planting the willows from SUNY ESF, from the biomass farm, agriculture to architecture. This is some of how we're thinking about a multi-species system combined with the living systems. Trees, this was the fabricators on site, Arch NYC, Silman Engineering, enormous amount of folks working on this project. The credit list is on our website. We also used 3D printed biomaterials as well as canvas materials, pine rosin. Everything we were doing was as nature-based as possible. Jute was the main construction material that was crocheted and woven. Here's our team every day crocheting things. These people are awesome. The panels put in place, and now it is doing its thing. It is a terrestrial reef meant to jumpstart biodiversity, growing every single day. We are weaving those plants in. Some have died already. More woody plants will be replaced, and we're getting this system to work. It will be an experiment. We're going to learn from it, improve it into the next iteration. It's there. There it is from lovely drone views. Also had a chance of working with the Lord Norman Foster Foundation as chair of sustainability. This was a slide meant for Lord Norman Foster. It's his project he did. in 1978, the Hempstead House, an amazing moment in architecture. This was tech. This was the silvers, not the whites, not the grays, the silvers, although he was an American, so he couldn't quite do it. And I think that it's a unitized system where arches made out of materials that were lightweight, plug and play systems for bathrooms and double skin facade systems, lots of concrete, but carefully organized. And then our system, I point out here, very similar in scale, but everything changed to be engineered and living. Scaffolding gets replaced, used again and again and again. No concrete in that structure. We use something called diamond piers. It is a small amount of concrete where we use SDS drills for bearing loads, dig steel poles inside the ground. We solve our cantilevers, we solve our foundation. It can be reused in perpetuity. That material is great. So we're not using concrete. It's a terrible material. There are some folks, even at MIT, getting better with it, et cetera. And then the panel systems, not only designed for humans, but designed for all different types of mammalian life. This is the elevation of this project and other views. This is the different species and the diagrid areas for where the branches cross over, strengthening the entire system. That's some of the 3D printed biomaterials and the woven jute. And then the geometry is there based on the angle that trees will graft together successfully. Here you see it being shown in this particular slide. And this one again. So the idea is to compare it to a greenfield development, a typical suburb in New Jersey, and what we could get from a village made out of growing homes, the amount of carbon sequestered and what we preserve. So roughly we develop 18% of the land compared to 95% of the land in a Jersey suburb. Much better. We sequester an enormous amount of carbon, almost the same as the same 4 acres of uninterrupted land. That is another view of it. We have multiple wildlife cameras that are capturing some very weird things on there. We will use that research to find out how this terrestrial reef is being occupied and what creatures love it. It is itself its own self-reliant food web that's felt on the inserts, et cetera. And then I know it was only like 20 minutes, so show that there's 1 or 2 other projects. That's it. So this was another client of ours, different project. This is the cricket shelter and farm. We worked with thousands of these guys. And the thought was we needed an alternate form of protein. And instead of eating cows, pigs, chicken, lamb all the time, we needed to think about eating insects. Roughly 80% of the planet will eat some form of insect every day, including yourselves and your peanut butter and contaminants, whatever is there. We can't eat all those cows, pigs, and chicken all the time. We could save 2,000 gallons of water for the same gram of protein and 300 times the amount of greenhouse gas emissions. When you look at land use for cricket farming, for the same amount of protein versus cattle at an industrial scale, the savings are enormous. You could do it inside urban areas. That's those little pink bits. Those are cricket farms. We use a technology called architecture, light, space, air program, to design the best possible universe for these crickets, gave them a place where they would enjoy life, not think about survival, produce every 6 weeks a bag of chirp chips that has amazing protein, an alternate source of protein. We worked with Michelin-rated chefs, tuned the flavor of their gut metabolism with lime rinds, orange peels, apple cores, made a idea of crickets that would taste super good, then made them into pasta. Best pasta I've ever had in my life. If I've offended some Italians, the chef was Italian, it's okay. Try cricket pasta. Bagels, technically kosher, also good. Bonbons from crickets. As long as I'm not eating a thing with wigs and eyeballs and legs, it's a flour that's produced from this system. And the roof mechanisms on the top is part of letting you know that the crickets are happy and healthy. As the males do the stratolation effect, creating that chirping sound that goes through the vibrating columns of air that are passively cooling the shelter, moves out through the wind cowls on the top. And this is what separates us from engineers, is that it's, you know, the little wind cowls did their job, but we thought, let's just turn it into an instrument, make this into these cricket horns that would accentuate the sound. And then I pointed this out a million times, but it's just true. We worked on encouraging them to have lots of sex. So we designed the cricket sex pod, which is where the males and females come together and repopulate the entire shelter every 6 weeks or so. And then the last thing, oh no, I want to show the monarch thing. Then looking at, am I okay with time? There's a nod, okay. All right, okay. So we were looking at an idea of where you get your food from. So we developed a flat, packed, not vertical, not green wall, but a green ball that would be your own farm / cabin / furniture for urban areas. Develop the geometries that would be put in places as zero petrochemical EVA foam. It's connected to 9 columns of sub-irrigation, double skin pots. You can do cellular agronomy, or you can grow food directly, not high yield crops like corn and wheat and what we have Iowa for that. We don't need to do that, but things you want to have fresh, wheatgrass, arugula, various spices. You grow your own food. You know where it comes from. It tastes great because you made it. And then inside, you can also grow more food, thus 3 times the amount of growth compared to a wall. You can also hang out inside the shelter. We also thought that this would sell well in Colorado at the time, and didn't. IKEA made a version of it. I don't encourage you to check it out. It's not beautiful, but it's extraordinarily cheap. And the last project was about design against extinction in its fullest possible form. We were experimenting. Does one say that? No. We were collaborating with butterflies to save monarchs from extinction. I now have 3 daughters. They will probably never see the monarch butterfly in their lifetimes. We have successfully, and I mean we, humans in North America, from Maine all the way to Mexico, have basically wiped them off the face of the earth. We've done that by destroying their habitat, and not intentionally so. They like milkweed, humans do not. We were working with painted ladies. These are not monarchs. Painted ladies are not an at-risk species. Since we've been working on this project, we went from an at-risk butterfly to an listed endangered species. This is part of the Cooper Hewitt show at the Smithsonian. We worked on a building where inside the skin of the building, not losing a single square footage of rentable commercial space, we developed a system that was a vertical meadow teeming with life for monarch butterflies. It was a sanctuary in a lepidopterium, which is a word meaning place for butterflies. Did that in the atrium, pollinator garden, and education center on the rooftop, and then connected to spaces in between. We also got a grant from Microsoft, which put these large OLED screens that show the drama of these little creatures from far away, so community people there in Lolita can say, what's going on with that building? Oh, it's got a bunch of butterflies. Why monarch butterflies? Oh, we're killing them all. That's not good. Can we do something about it? Yes, here is a link. We also got a commission to work for the American Museum of Natural History, redesigning their feeders. You could see a version of it now in the Gilder Center, not the ones that we planned, but essentially the feeders were Petri dishes with Gatorade. And thousands of kids per day would go, and I was a kid, saw that, would see this. We thought we could do better, look for perch points, egg laying, eating actual fruit, not Gatorade, and attracting folks to check out those butterflies. We had another grant with BASF working on the greenest possible chemistry for concrete called Green Sense. It impregnates fly ash. It's fireproof, will last 200 years, and structural. It was designed based on the geometry and the programmatic needs for a vertical meadow of specifically monarch butterflies. We then built and engineered a 2-ton fully operational facade where you look out of the window of this building and you see that meadow teeming with biodiversity and life and actual monarchs. It's semi-porous, so they can go in and out. They're not trapped. All these people sending me emails about I'm trapping butterflies. No, and I'm not breeding butterflies for weddings. No, they can choose to come in and out because they have food and it's safe. And that's the point. And it's inside the interstitial space of a facade. So this is some actual monarchs that were there in the Cooper Hewitt. The Cooper Hewitt is not a museum. They cannot have live organisms in there. It is totally not cool to do that. So we did it for one day for a few hours. They were model butterflies to get the photographs, and then they were released into the conservatory garden. And that was fine, and painted ladies would be replacing them. These are some of the things. Anyway, then we went on to get ODA architects and working on a project there, which is a 60-story tower in Olive Street in Los Angeles, working on a platform to work on L. Segunda butterflies. And that's some of the sections there. And just a kind of parting thought, a lot of what we do is provocation. It's imagining, thinking about a better world, fine, but actually looking at the science of the materials that can do that, then compositions of all these things working in uniform together or in unison together. Things like vertical axis wind turbines, independent battery packs, autonomous rail systems instead of traffic, riparian corridors instead of sewage systems, all kinds of green on the surface of our buildings for food or for air quality, a modicum of somehow of managing all these things, either by automated systems or humans. This is 42nd Street that we think is a socio-ecological version of it. It's not the perfect design. It's one of many iterations that I think others can take on and do the work themselves. Anyway, that's what we've been doing. Thank you very much, guys. I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much for sharing this fascinating work and bringing interspecies and biodiversity in design in the discussion. So, so now I'd like to invite actually all of our speakers to sit in those chairs over here. And also ask all of our moderators to sit in the kind of front line. You want to sit over there? You want to go over there? So we have many microphones. Pass them around. So here's what we're gonna do. We've asked our moderators also to come up with some questions. So we have and then we're gonna open it to Q&A. And but first, again, thank you all of you. This is like a fascinating series of talks, and it's really like, you know, each one brought like a kind of special perspective to this topic that we try to discuss today or define, biodynamic environments, and especially you even put it in a very nice diagram in a slide. So thank you for that. So I don't know. So I guess maybe we can ask by I can ask by asking like what it's if we're trying to, I don't know, think about this interaction of like our body and the environment through materials and kind of like this new, is there like a new thing or a trend emerging? Like, can we find like this common axis between the work of like with what we discussed today? So what are the biodynamic environments, for example, we're trying to define? It's like an easy question, an easy question. I thought it was for an easy one. I'm assigned to ask you because I introduced you, but anyone can reply. Like, what's the new thing coming up? Is it like, can we kind of put it in like, try to put it in a sentence or like paragraph? Like at least for you.
From a historical perspective, do we have a or
No, your own perspective. Your own perspective. I mean, you talk a lot about interspecies and like biodiversity, which is I want to hear more about that.
Yeah, sure. Now we're wait, there we go.
There, it's on. You know, sort of the culmination of the work of many people here and definitely as well over there. I don't think there's any, and not saying that there's any planned sort of procedure for how these things arrive.
Mm-hmm.
I think there has been a deep interest in looking at past generations and how they solve problems, concrete, glass, and steel, from modern to high modern and postmodern and whatever moderns there are, and then thinking that it's just not satisfying anymore to be here on this planet and contribute to the problem side of the equation. So I think looking at materials that will be healthy for humans and in turn healthy for other organisms is the right path. I can almost say that with incredible certainty. And it's a matter of perspective, because if you do something like well certification, which is internal environments that are healthy for people, many of these people don't necessarily care about the birds and the woods. They could be, big time, Trump supporters or something, hate the environment, drive giant trucks that belch filth into the air. But when it comes to the health of their family, their children, and the space that they're in, no VOCs, no luxury vinyl products, makes sense. And in turn, that effect will affect the environment. The other perspective, lead, where you're sort of accounting for doing good and in some ways almost being forced to do that, doesn't really have the same level of incentive than surviving or actually thriving as a human. So I think that has been, there's that two approaches that we've been in contention with.
I'm also intrigued, like some work actually from your university, and they're starting to design like digital interfaces for animals. So interactions with birds and things. So like how, like, I don't know, it's kind of intriguing. Like, how do you design for other species, No. Anyway, I want to give this microphone to the moderators.
Thank you. I have a very simple question. Actually, I love your work. What you've seen was so exciting that my fear is that is more related to disappointment of how this kind of research arrived to a wider public. In a way, what I'm trying to say that I'm also my personal research or the people I work with is very similar to what you do. So probably this is also why I particularly like. But the question that I always receive at the end of a presentation is kind of always the same when I go in a public which is not done by experts. So it's a very banal question. But it seems that for the wider public, this is the most important question. So the banal question that I always receive is, oh, that's very exciting. But talking about the ecological transition, we heard that doing this stuff costs more than what they do in the usual business. So how can you convince people to go in the better way, knowing that in the short term, this will be more cost effective? So how do you answer to the fact that ecological transition, apparently, people think that will cost more? I tell you just briefly that my answer is that it's not true that it costs more. It's that we are just, how can I say, privatizing the income and externalizing the public damages. And you already show in the, but we are not in a political phase where easy solutions, or let's say complex solutions are really clear to, easy to be understood. So this is my first question. And if I can do a second question related to this is, so I finished, so I promise I'm not going to say it, is related to this aspect. Also, when you were showing about what you do, great thing in Parsons, and you were saying, oh, you have to ask yourself this, this, and this, which is exactly, I think, what we should do. But the real point is that if you really want a political level, how we can reduce the impact, or let's say how we can think about politics to go below the impact that are bringing us to 1.5 degrees. We noticed that the major game-changing conditions are highly political, done by decision-making condition. Just to make an example, two examples that go in different way. Formaldehyde in European Union is basically forbidden. So it's they decide because the health has a different impact in the European Union, and so many other material. So in other country, this is not happening. And as long as American architects are much more, I can tell you, more sensitive about this than Italian architects, in Europe, this works better. A decision-making level is strong. So what is our role? How can we make our voice heard? How can we communicate with people that speak a different language? How can we make an impact in different ways? So in a way, I think the two questions are somehow related. This is, by the way, in the opposite way about the cricket, because as I don't know if you know, Mitch, but in Europe, we have from the European, that you have to eat cricket. You can imagine what happened in Italy. This is the Pascha can be. So this is going to be, you have no idea, every day in the news, this is a discussion. So the point is, how can you convince an Italian to, oh, this is, you have been quite convincing, but I can keep it. Okay, sorry.
Americans were feeding lobsters to prison. Americans were feeding lobsters to prisoners only in Maine for about 130 years. And those prisoners were very quiet about how good those lobsters tasted. And then eventually it became part of the culture to kind of, now it's phenomenal food, and we understand that. It does take time. It takes culture. It takes chefs. It takes exquisite making of food. It takes things that are better tasting than other variants beforehand, and to get away from the ick factor. I couldn't think of a more scarier animal. Well, lobsters are up there with the super scary looking animals to eat, and we need to diversify the entire food chain in every possible way. So it's no surprise that those that understand cuisine, Italians, so all of Asia, like there's ways of introducing it that would get more people to onboard. I know that when I grew up in the United States, Americans didn't eat we didn't eat sushi, we didn't eat raw fish. Like in the 70s, that just didn't happen. It was bears eat raw fish. And then through very high cultural interventions and Japanese chefs, et cetera, sushi became a thing, and now we've accepted it. It just sometimes takes 50 to 100 years or more. And most of the people that want to manufacture crickets, including Mark Zuckerberg's sister, there's a group called Ento Farms in Canada, another group in California. Their funding fell out because they just didn't believe Americans were going to buy it. And I saw an episode of Shark Tank 10, 12 years ago. They're trying to sell cricket powder. It's still not really readily available. But one day it might be. I don't know. It's a side story.
Okay, so in terms of regulation and cost. So regulation is hugely important, and it can move things faster than any work that we can do as individuals in small or big firms, without a doubt. But that's not how it works in the US. So it's very hard to move that machine of regulation. It's very hard to change, to change laws. It happens, but it's a very slow moving machine. You saw on the slide I showed that there's, 62,000 chemicals were grandfathered in 1974. That's never going to be undone, So, so while it's the most effective path and vehicle for change, it's the slowest, so we can't wait for it. So we have to make the choices. Even, we have to make the decisions. We have to have the conversations with our clients. We have to look certainly to Europe and the work that's happening there and borrow from it, look at what's, the change that is happening and see where we can learn from it and see how we can implement it into our practice. Have conversations across, in other countries, across continents, and keep in tune in that way. Still also push the legislation. And there are groups like the Green Science Policy Institute that I referred to, doing tremendous work, getting PFAS eliminated. Lots of great work going on in sort of California, but nothing is happening at the rate we need it to happen now, given what's gone on for the past 80 years. The other thing with cost is, to your point too, not everything is more expensive. Some things are, for sure, and some of the things that are affordable on one hand with the dollar amount might be manufactured at a great distance. So you have to, not everything is measured in dollars and cents. So you have to weigh up what the cost is through the whole sort of life cycle. A product might be more expensive. And if we take something like a flooring or a wall covering, something that there's a high volume of in any sort of building, you need to look at it through the whole life cycle. LVT, it's really hard to compete with that, dollar per square foot amount. It doesn't last long. You've got to replace it. If you look at another product like linoleum that's going to go down, or rubber that's going to last, 3-4 times as long. But you have to factor that into your cost. So that's part of the conversation with the client. Okay, I can give you this flooring. It's going to last 4 to 5 times longer than this cheaper alternative that you maybe came to me with. That's part of the calculation that sort of needs to happen. The other thing you can do as a designer, be very thoughtful about the material selection process. You know, is there a way that you can design, you know, a sleeker palette, like a, you know, a tighter palette in the sense of use less materials. It means there's less materials that you have to research. So whatever research you found is, which is time consuming, and can be expensive because of the time. So you're looking at a palette that has, you know, 5 or 6 materials, and then you're buying them in bulk. So how can you be creative around that too, you know? So there are ways to think around it. It means that you have to have conversations with all of the stakeholders. The conversations have to happen at the beginning. And then you must look at everything through the entire life cycle and know that whatever products I specify and put into my building has a direct impact on the environment. There's, without a shadow, there's no, it's unquestionable, you know, where it comes from, how it's made directly impacts the sort of the environment. So it's, I think we have to move away from this measuring things in dollars and cents and having conversations at one point in the life cycle, you know, have them throughout.
Sure. Add to that, there's this way forward, right? Using less and choosing what you use from the products that you have, but you can also talk to your material, you know, raw material suppliers. There's something we do in the lab where, you know, there's medical biopolymers and medical grade materials that we implant in our bodies that, you know, we digest very well, that Earth could digest very well. But the problem is that we buy them from pharmaceuticals that, or pharmaceutical making compound factories that will purify that material to the extent that does not cause a, you know, a incompatibility reaction in our health. But for packaging grade, for architecture grade, for glue grade, we don't need any of that purity. So truly talking to those raw material suppliers is a way to go. We have been talking to chitosan suppliers and to a couple of more ingredients in our blend suppliers that suddenly realize there's a new market with all of these architects and designers that want to make their own materials that need, you know, low purity, chitosan, alginate, whatever, that they are not going to eat it, right? They're not going to implant it on anybody. They just need the lowest grade you can. And my chitosan comes with little antenna and pieces of fishing nets, and that's okay, right? Because we are just going to make a blend to cast an earth-based system with it. So that's another way, right? To get that lower grade, much less harsh chemicals involved and much lower price. They realize now this is a new market. So it's very exciting for those material suppliers. Another way is, as you were saying, multifunctional materials, right? Nature will make one thing that does, you know, insulation and thermal regulation, as well as structural support, and also, you know, grades how water is transmitted throughout. So one of my students is now looking at substituting green walls, because green walls have, you know, 7 materials involved into making that, and 5 of them are non-recyclable and super polluting, like water barriers and fastening systems and irrigation systems. So if you can make one thing that is a green wall, for instance, he's looking at a clay-based vessel that contains symbiotic mycelium plant relationship, and that's it. And that thing is structural, and it's a green wall, and, you know, cleans air, and it can, if it touches the floor, it will also bioremediate soils. So the clay, of course, works as the structure. So multifunction, talking back to the suppliers, and in terms of the regulation, this is funny, in Barcelona, it just came out that you will not be able to sell or rent your home in the next, in 3 years, I think, if it's not a certain grade of energy efficient. So everybody's running to get that working, right? So it's just such as simple as that. You won't be able to take profit of your property anymore. So let's run and make it energy efficient. And that means, you know, your hemp jacket, for instance. Anybody wants to add?
There are a couple of things. Yes. Yes. No. I think this is okay. Yes. I enjoyed very much the presentations. I enjoyed mine less than yours. Um, there is always something that is intriguing to me and actually causes me anxiety, which is that we are unfolding arguments about the ecological impact of something that we do, the way we measure the health impact of a material, the way biodiversity needs to exist, and we need to plant something that will promote it, let's say. But we do not, we can never hold in our minds everything, the whole picture. Like, how does the cost of something and its health impact and the jobs it created and the animal it killed and the city that is going to be the result of it and the I don't know, the paradigm shift in supply chains and the way transportation will work. If you grab the argument from one of those aspects and you unfold it, you will arrive at something that appears glorious. If you unravel it from another one, it is not going to be so glorious. You're going to fail, which means that collectively, we do not have the tools or we do not have the cognitive ability at the moment to actually evaluate holistically, like in its total sense, holistically, what is a good bet for a future. That's my gut. That's what makes me worried. For example, you said very well all the UN statistics at the beginning, alarming for the future and so on. That comes with a population growth. These are the statistics today. We also have the population growth. We're gonna, in 80 years from today, we're gonna have double the amount of people in cities globally. What kinds of people are those going to be? What kind of incomes are they going to have? How are they going to be sheltered? Are they going to be able to have a choice about a healthy material so that they can drive the economy? Or should it be that it is mandated from top down? Or should it be that as designers we have to create structures that will enable them? So it's neither you ought to do this because it's good, nor it is a top-down policy, or it's all of those things together. You know, what you were saying before reminded me a little bit about recycling. We get to teach people, we say to people, you should recycle. Sometimes it works, and I mean, over time and with 15 years or 20 years of education, the younger generation might arrive to this, but more or less when you have a plastic bottle in your hand, and it's inconvenient for you to recycle, you are not going to do it. So on the other hand, there is pressures from the government to actually recycle and so on, but for some reason it's not happening. Like still 80% of the plastics are floating in the ocean or something like this. So the challenge is, I mean, I'll talk for myself. The arguments that we are building for the projects that we are doing are easier always than what the reality of the situation is, or how they could actually become real things. And that's something that in general makes me, like, I sound like a contractor usually. I'm trying to say, okay, how much material is needed to build like for a population of 2 million people? What is the number one material that is going to make that future happen? Should we bet on it? And then the arguments unfolds in so many different ways that there is no single way to make a decision about them.
Yeah, I think I'm happy to share anxiety always. But I was thinking, like, for your question, like, what unites, like, what is the shared kind of attitude to materials among us? And I think it's like the switch from thinking about material is thinking about environment. And like, so including like more things, the material itself. I mean, for me, it's like everything in the world and like the story and like all of those fascinating aspects. And then the manufacturing, I think it's like super important to think how things are made. And then all of the things that materials can do with the environment. So like all the biochemical interactions. For me, it's like the DNA computation that yeah, it's more obvious like why we should do it for the medical applications than for other applications, but I'm very positive about this and the social aspects as well. So like, how do we think about material as environment and what else? And I think in the way we teach also, it's also kind of becoming obvious that it's not only about material choices and the feel and the aesthetics, but like all of those other considerations. Zooming out.
Thank you. I think Marcel had a
Yes,
question.
so thank you, everyone. I think it was great to see all the presentation. I think very complementary and different from each other, but I think really, you know, thinking about the future. And so my question in a way, it's in sort of, you know, expanding, I think, on your point, Alex, in relation to the context of rapid urbanization. So thinking about, you know, certain geographic areas that are rapidly growing in terms of higher density, but also how things are built, you know, in a very fast pace. So I think if we think about, you know, the, let's say the biomaterials that we have or the biotechnologies available, I think one issue is to think about how we use this to build future cities or even architecture. It's scalability in the end. I think the technologies exist or will exist tomorrow because, you know, I mean, across science, we are working at the forefront of this. But I think if to think about fully biotech cities or fully sustainable, I mean, this is true. We cannot do everything at the same time, right? Not only that, but in the end, there is always a, you know, positive and negative impact somehow, even if we think that everything has a positive impact. So I think for me, the question is how do we think about scalability in the context of building cities from scratch or rebuilding existing city or in a fast growing urbanization. And I think how this can be taught in terms of the real impact that we have through the agency of design. Because of course, you know, we work across science, we work across different disciplines, but what through our agency as architect, urbanists, or designers, or interior designers we have, and how design can really drive these, let's say, scenarios, right? And how we can work across. And so my question is more about how do we see this happening in the near future, but also the challenges that we have ahead in terms of really implementing these things, knowing the constraints that we have in terms of to scale up, for instance, biomaterials and biotechnologies. So some of this technology exists at the microscopic scale, but we still don't have it as a kind of full-scale implementation. So it's more a question and a reflection in terms of how do we build in the future and you know, and what can we do through the power and agency of design.
I maybe add a more small comment to this question so it can. I guess another thing that we need to discuss based on the question that Marcela just asked is where all this population growth is going to happen. And as we know, it's not going to be Europe and it's not going to be the US. It's going to be Africa and a little bit of Asia. And so we are discussing about technologies that they need to be transferred somewhere, technologies that need to be invented in a place. What kind of design are we talking about here that is going to be transformative? Because as we know from architecture, buildings last for quite some time. So what is the scale of change that we are discussing about these regions and the regions that the actual population growth is going to happen?
They all have them. Yes, these are the questions that they might have. Yeah, I know, they all have them. So, wow, you're asking really hard questions that we might need more days to answer. And yeah, as one of my colleagues says, in interdisciplinary design, nobody knows what they're doing, right? We have to all talk together and think together. Anyhow, to that question on where this is going to happen and how, in a way, how do we not export anymore stuff, right? How do we embed and integrate within those regions? There's beautiful projects happening. For instance, I don't know if you guys know Red House Architects. They've been looking at making, there's an encroacher bush in Namibia that grows everywhere. It's an invasive species, and they've made that a solution, right? They said, why don't we feed that to mycelium? as its substrate. So we can make mega blocks of structural systems that fruit. So we have mushrooms to feed people with, and we enlist everybody in building this new housing with these blocks, right? So it's a circular solution that gives food, new food source, gets rid of an invasive species, makes new housing a sustainable system with it, and gives everybody new jobs there, right? Without exporting more than a couple of oyster mushroom spores. So that solution also taps into their own, the color of housing there is that beautiful red. So it maps into also somehow of a vernacular culture and appreciation of that type of housing. So I'm really supportive of these holy grail projects that tap into an issue and turn it into a solution there without exporting more than, a couple of spores, maybe a CNC, or maybe, an extruder head, more than, a new biotechnology that works here, to your point. And as Alex was saying before, the manufacturing systems will come, but that's a mindset. If I require, bioplastic shoes, or, if I want my floors to be made out of cork, and I keep asking for it as a user, those manufacturing systems will come. Right now we have injection molding everywhere and concrete formwork everywhere. Why? Because it's been studied for 500 years. So if we keep asking for it, the water-based fabrication technology will come, and cork charring and other types of high pressure citrus peels that make plates, and we are not looking at it, that Bhavna is developing, will come soon if the machines are there to, and I'll let you continue.
Yes. No, I want to talk. Are you certain that if we ask for it, it's going to come? And if it is, so did people ask for vinyl siding and for synthetic flooring? And why? How did it come? How did that come?
Desire that.
Yeah,
the feel of that shine.
and it was inexpensive. It offered something. This is like it offered something in the sense that it was easy to install, it was fast, it was light, it was
all of these good things that for some reason I think of materials as species that survived over other species that did not survive in the long term. They are also products that engage with people in many different ways. They give jobs, they make people's life easier. They have net positive and negatives like any other thing. I think that the approach, if we ask for it, is going to happen, is a suspect to. I mean, it might, but it's not necessarily true that it is going to happen.
If it's desirable.
If it is desirable, and what makes it desirable?
Beautiful. It makes me better. It makes me more beautiful. It shows that I'm awesome.
Yes, I remember that you said that as well, and it hit me. And I'm saying, how many people in the world choose based on those criteria?
No, this room maybe is full of them.
I know, but we are a very specific crowd here. So we have to think about it in a more holistic way. I'm not disagreeing. First of all, we should be demanding these things to happen as citizens. But I think that it's more important for us as designers and designers of systems, let's say, to instigate processes that will make them arrive to us, so that it's a feedback loop between the supply and the demand, let's say. Because again, I will say this: the vinyl siding and the oil-based flooring and I don't know, the steel construction and the rebar and so on. It's not that there is a system that imposed these things to us. We made them. We had our own criteria for choosing. Usually it's self-serving criteria, make wealth, I don't know, all of these kinds of things. And it just happened. So this kind of systemic thing that is integrated at so many different levels is what we have to be reconsidering.
Sure. This was hard.
I mean, yes, but ask her, where is the dean? Why isn't this hardwood flooring? Because the budget wasn't allowing. Yes.
I think maybe like another way to look at it is like technology, like technological revolutions, they already happening. So like the biotechnological revolution is already on its way. So if thinking, so I know, for example, like in chemicals production and like food molecules production, there is a switch from petroleum-based to like a biomanufacturing, meaning like using fermentation processes to manufacture. Like a good example of it is the Ginkgo Bioworks, with like a big company in Boston. So thinking about like fermentation processes as the new manufacturing methods, I mean, it might transition to materials, making fibers for textile, for example, which is like the industry that is in most trouble. And I don't know, architecture and cities is a little bit above like my scope, but using living organisms and cells and bacteria to ferment molecules, ferment filaments, ferment materials, might be like the scaling up of the current. And there is the food industry, which is very much biomaterials, with all of its manufacturing technologies that is working at scale.
These are difficult questions to answer and extremely relevant. And I don't think, and no one's saying this, there is a silver bullet. And we have the alternative saying, which is silver buckshot. There'll be many solutions from the top down, bottom up. Probably won't be able to credit any one individual, Elon Musk definitely, with solving this problem. It will be society, it will be communities, it'll be Europe, Asia, Americas, be many people working to solve this problem. We will definitely solve it. Because if we don't, no one's going to say, we're not alive to say that I was wrong or anyone else. We didn't do it. So we are going to get our way out of it. There's some blocks. And there's some ideas about how to remove those blocks. And I am going to point to Elon in this case on some level. For years at MIT, we're working on future cars, getting the electrical car out there, electric-based motor vehicles and drivetrains, been around since the first vehicles. No one could sell an electric car to North America or Europe. Then along came, you know what, let's not make him a savior, but some figure decided to sell luxury, power, sophistication, and beauty. And underneath all of that was green, but never really mentioned that until now. Recently, Elon has been doing that. Tesla was able to get the electric economy out there, not the Germans, not what Japan was doing in the 80s. So that idea of selling what people want, which is luxury, sophistication, power, speed, kind of worked. It was the wrong approach, I think, on some level, but it did resonate. It's not going to work for everything. It can't work for everything. We're facing something called predatory delay, which I try my best to communicate this everywhere I go. Predatory delay is, and this is a recent example, is Aramco buying your renewable energy company and saying publicly, great idea, you're taking pig manure and making methane and powering tractors and producing the most amazing renewable energy we could ever fathom, and it's scaling really quickly. Now you're a part of the Aramco empire, $7 trillion a year. Every single day, Aramco's in business. It's just more profit. So they're not overtly saying green technology or green energy is bad. They're just saying, let's not do it right now. We have some problems with the CEO. There's some issues in the lab. We're not sure how safe it is. Testing, because for 20 years, we delay something like that is more profit for them. I know that in the libraries of institutions like this and in Cambridge and everywhere else are a host of solutions that would give us civilization 2.0. There are people who had PhDs long before us that did this work, and it's just slow to come out. There are reasons for that. One is predatory delay. Another might be we just don't have the crisis. Like we had concrete and steel because we had to rebuild destroyed Europe. And that became an aesthetic and a quick way of doing it, an optimized way of doing it. I think if we had another crisis, and this is not my concept, it's Paul Gilding, CEO of Greenpeace, later on Bill Gates and others. If we had what's called this kind of Pearl Harbor moment, we see the enemy at the gates. We viscerally understand that climate change is affecting us directly, like Kim Stanley Robinson in that great book, Ministry of the Future. And we learn and we can see killing 33 million Indians in India melt because of temperature change. And we don't do much about that. We just say, well, those poor people in India are too close to the equator. It's kind of their problem. Then it begins to add up. As that fear takes hold, we start doing what Americans did. And now they're not the only example, but America had no interest in getting in the war. And then we were attacked at Pearl Harbor, and we stopped the bickering, the arguing, the delays, and we retooled an entire economy to make tanks and planes and soldiers to fight Nazis and enemies and get rid of that person. If climate gets to the point where it's like that, I have every faith that humans, and not just Americans, will rise to the occasion and get our act together. And in a year or so, we're moving into all these different technologies that make sense for the environment. It will impact jobs, totally true. And that's one of the delays, but that delay is really reasonable. Jobs are important. Unions are important. Getting rid of people and their livelihoods is a bad idea. We have to think about that economy of scale and doing it in a way that respects those folks. I completely agree. But then again, generations of coal miners, not such a great idea, but we do need a very clear alternative path for them. I'll pause there.
I know some of our moderators have some questions on hold, and some of our colleagues, but I wanna, because we are over time, I wanna make sure at least we get one question from students. So if anyone from the students has a question, please, now it's the time to speak.
Don't point at them. You're gonna be terrified.
No. I'm looking at my students. There you go.
No pressure. Everybody's looking at you.
At the back, no? Yeah, we got.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for all your presentations. First of all, really loved it. I kind of made it late, I'm sorry, but I was attending it online. My question for everybody is, I find something similar, like it's something small, but that's the main concern. Microplastics in the environment is growing, right? And I see that a lot of it is affecting the technology, the materiality, so-called biomaterials that we have right now will be affected down the line. What's like, do you guys have any solution to that? Is it something that you're still thinking about? Obviously not 100%, but do you think that's going to kind of affect everything that's built around us because of this poor degradation of microplastics? Like, I know it kind of does affect the structural elements a lot. Yeah, I just want to know what's your view on it.
Well, one of the greatest or the largest source of microplastics in the ocean is from paint. So a really kind of easy fix for that is to change your paint, move to sort of a mineral-based paint. That's the most obvious thing that that sort of comes to mind, and it's thinking about making and what materials you make with moving forward, like how is sort of something made, because you know, what exists, there's so little that we can do with what exists, you know, as it kind of goes to break down. So we have to really rethink about how we move forward. And I was thinking about this with an earlier comment too. Indigenous people talk about moving forward, you know, progress and moving forward. It's walking forward while looking backward at the same time. So decisions were made in the past around sort of plastics, as an example. It seemed like an amazing materials. We know the health implications now. We know that there's difference. So we kind of learned from that, sort of moving forward. We know that that we're you know, wiping out you know, entire species. So we have to take that knowledge and, you know, learn from it. I do think it's, back to your point, I am more optimistic about it. About the the future. I think the more knowledge people have when you have these conversations, it's nobody's intention as a designer or a human being to be involved in something that's creating harm. No, it's never the intention. So and once you have the conversations, there's improvement there. But
I have to so in short, Bart, it's gonna be fine. You'll
It's not that I'm worried about it.
I know.
Positive future.
I just thought to add a positive note now that we need to wrap up really because we are over time and we don't want to lose our table. So please hold your questions for I know you've like for during dinner. And thank you so much everyone for attending. Thank you to so because maybe we can do every year, but Biodynamic Environments 2 and 3, and so we can have it more often. Thank you so much.